Everything by again. I don't think you know it. Wesley, just slow your roll. You got to get a little more schooled in this space. And I got skin in the game here. I got a dog in the fight. I got sons. I'm Jewish. I got all the things here that are both of military age. And by the way, everyone's up for a draft. So get your kids ready. Both the boys, the girls, your queers, your gays, everyone's going in. Um, but that is what is happening right now. They are going in to free the Palestinians because nobody else will, and they're trying to take out Hamas and the rockets. And Israel has a right to defend itself. And by the way, those numbers of the dead in Gaza are bullshit. They're literally handed to you by friggin' the terrorists. How do you trust terrorists? I don't know. That's my go off, Nelson. I'm not staying long because this is just like people don't understand. Like your freedoms are next. Pick out your burqa or get your fucking heads out of your asses.
I want to go to Yusuf real quick. Yusuf, what are your thoughts?
My
Matter of fact,
brother,
before I go
how
to
are you,
Yusuf,
bro?
real quick, before I go to you, right?
Yeah.
If you guys in the audience, I want to see how divided this space is right now. If you guys agree with Babs, put a one in the chat right now. Put a one in the chat if you agree with everything Babs is saying right now. Put a zero in the chat if you disagree with everything she's saying. Drop it in the chat right now. So hit the chat feature bottom right corner. Respond to the tweet of this space with your answer. One if you agree, zero if you disagree. Yusuf, let's talk about it.
What's up, my brother? I mean, Barbara, I have a question for you before I really chime in on what you said. Are you an Islamophobe?
No, I love Muslims and I love every religion and I'm pure love. So don't start here and say that I'm a racist, I'm a homophobe, I'm Islamophobic so that you can take the message away and start bashing
I'm
me. But
sorry.
thank you for the
I
question.
didn't
Are
mean
you
to.
are you anti-Semitic?
I didn't mean to pre-assume anything. I just wanted to ask the question before I really dove into my arguments. But I just
Yeah, are
wanted.
you a servant of Allah? Can we talk about
I
Allah a
just.
little bit?
I
Can you tell
just.
me all about him and how many wives he had and how many
See,
people he
that's
beheaded
those are
and all about
Islamophobic
Allah?
comments. You
Holy
just proved
fuck.
to me that you're an Islamophobe.
No,
Thank you very
listen, you're a
much.
servant of Allah. Why don't you teach us all about Allah and how you're supposed
Allah
to
means in
murder all
Arabic the
Jews?
God. You are being
And
a
by the
hypocrite
way,
right
let
now.
me tell you
You
something
are
about
being a hypocrite
Islamophobia.
right now.
I have every right to be
Jews and
scared of you.
Muslims
You want
believe
me
in the
fucking
same
dead,
God,
asshole.
Barbara.
Shut the fuck up for a
Why are
second.
you
Just
being
shut up.
aggressive?
You are the
One
person
You're
that
mic.
like
wants me
double my
dead.
age.
You are the one that wants me
You're
dead, right? Am I
what?
correct? That is
Bro,
your
I
message.
asked you a
That's your
question.
message.
How are you getting to these conclusions? You're driven by fear, which is the devil.
You
The
are
devil
driven
is
by hate
riding your
and
brain
murder
right
and
now,
terror
Barbara.
and beheading
Wake
and
up.
rape.
Wake
That is
up.
my problem.
Wake up. The devil is in your head. Take control of your thoughts, Barbara. Calm down. You see, this is what lack of faith does to people. They are driven by fear, controlled by their emotions. I asked her a question and she exploded. She exploded.
Going viral, dog. Holy shit.
Yusuf, check your
Listen,
messages, brother. Check it. Yo, I'm out.
I'm
put a
too
thumbs
busy to
up.
check my messages right now. My messages are blowing up, bro.
Wait a second. Put a thumbs up on your avatar if you were feeling Babs there, man. You agree with Babs. Just put a thumbs up on your avatar right now. If you agree with everything Babs was saying, drop a thumbs up. Thumbs down if you disagree. Thumbs down if you disagree. Everybody in the space right now, show me on your avatars. I'm scrolling down, looking through it. I'm trying to see how balanced we are in the space. So it's a bunch of people that have a thumbs down. Let me see. You still got a bunch of people with a thumbs up. God damn. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, listen, I didn't think we were going to start the show this early, but fuck it. I guess the show is in session, man.
Let's talk about it. Hey Nelson, can I reply to Danny? I think it was Danny, real quick, just to expand on what Barbara was saying a little bit. But maybe,
One second. Let Yusuf get it off. Let Yusuf get it off. Yusuf, get it off. Get it off, bro. Let's talk about it. Yusuf, let's go. Unmute your mic, bro.
My brother. Okay, I just wanted to go back to the title here, just to get all emotional conversation out of this space. You know, I'm a logical person. I make a lot of money because I'm not an emotional person. I think I may have actually a condition like Elon, where I'm like less emotional to things. So I apologize if I come off as non-emotional while I say what I say, right? But I just want to answer the question in the title of this space: two-state solution or no two-state solution. What the fuck is a solution, right? I think before we can get to that point, before we can actually answer that question, right? It's like answering question 30 on a test before answering question 1. This question needs to be saved until certain things are done. What are these things that need to be done? Right now, there's a lot of people, including Hamas, including, Netanyahu, including a lot of people who are in violation of international war crimes. International war crimes and international laws are usually to be held accountable by the international party, right? The UN, the countries, all the leaders, pretty much everyone who has the most amount of nuclear power in the world looks at that and judges it, right? And a lot of people come up and they try to, affect the court cases and the jury and whatever, and everyone's demanding specific things. I think the first thing that needs to be done before we even think about solving what's happening right now, right? The only thing that can help what's happening right now is send aid to everyone who's affected. Every civilian that's affected, help them, right? As much as we can. That's what we got to do. But before we can even think about politics, right? We need to do the humanitarian stuff first, which a lot of us aren't doing. A lot of us are like praying or not. A lot of us aren't donating or not even helping either side, right? Which I think is morally wrong of all of us. We need to like financially support for humanitarian cause. The second thing is we need to advocate for war criminals and international criminals to be prosecuted internationally in a way just like how everyone's recording what's going on in the ground and everything. That needs to be a viral trend. The whole world needs to see international criminals prosecuted. What that's going to do for the world is going to allow us to really move forward with a real solution, with a real answer. If anybody was to commit certain crimes again on anybody, no matter what your situation is, right? It doesn't matter if you're poor and you're struggling and you're in the ghetto and then now you want to go into a rich people neighborhood and shoot them up. That's still a crime. That's still considered a crime. It doesn't matter what history is. It doesn't matter if a black man feels like the white person is racist to him. If the black man goes and kills the white man, it's still a crime. Just like if the white man was to kill the black man. It's not a racist crime. It's not a crime based on history. It's just a crime. So criminals need to be prosecuted. And before
And
you
you should
even
who's the criminal for you in this conflict?
everybody who's killed somebody, everybody who's, used weapons funded by people who are not involved in the war, bro. Like a lot of people are being funded right now to fight by people who want nothing to do with the fight. These people aren't willing to go down on the ground and fight, and they're funding these people, right? Paying their families' bills, paying everything, and being like, hey, sacrifice your life for this cause, and I'll take care of you financially. That's what's happening, bro. You understand? So I think everyone's a culprit to a certain extent. Like this is a very deep, deep, deep case, bro. And obviously, I'm 25 years old. I can't sit here and tell you exactly who's a criminal and who's not. But I'm scared of killers. I've never killed anybody. If I ever met somebody who's killed someone or put the hit on someone or told people to kill somebody, I would be scared of that person. I would never sit in the same room as that person. I would never even want to follow that person on social media. I wouldn't even want to look at them. I would block them. I would be scared of them, right? I would want to defend myself against a killer. And that's just my nature as a non-killer. I've never killed anybody. I've never intended to kill anybody. So that's my perspective, right? What I think we need to actually discuss here, and I would love to hear the opinions of other people, is who are the real criminals? Who are the real criminals in this situation, and who should be held accountable by the law, by international law, by U.S. standards, right? Who is the criminal? Because we're in the U.S., right? We're mostly American citizens here. We all love America. We all love the U.S. It's given us the opportunity to become educated, to be, who we are today, and a lot of us are proud of who we are. So, that being said, I would love to hear, other people's opinions on who the criminals are in the situation. Like, what do you guys think? Is it both sides are equally bad? Is it just one side only? Is it specific people on one side or just everyone on that side? Like, I would love to hear people's opinions on this because I personally, I can't get to an answer on that.
Mars, go ahead, bro.
Thanks, man. So we've had John Spencer on Nelson Spaces before, and he's an expert at military strategy and a lot of the law that surrounds it. And he's clearly defined for the people who are regular listeners that Israel hasn't committed any war crimes, and there's specific reasons for that. So if we want to compare like domestic law with war fighting and war law, it's just not the same thing. So I think the analogies far they fall really short of what we need to comprehend just to be serious and factual on the matter. Like it's you can't say what if I ran up in your neighbor's house and what if you were down the road and you were in a different gang or like any of that stuff. It really is just it might feel good to talk about, but it's not reality. That's not the law of war. So I think it's important to just at least delineate that fact before we get into these conversations down rabbit holes where it kind of just gets into nonsense a little bit. But I agree with Yusuf in a lot of ways. I also agree with Barbara in a lot of ways. I think Yusuf had it right about like who's funding what and who the villains are. But what we have to understand is Hamas isn't just some like neighborhood drug dealer or whatever. They're not just some bad guy. I mean, Hamas, they were voted into office and then they took power by brute force. And they took away agency from a lot of people in Palestine. And also, there's been a lot of brainwashing. And if you were an enemy of Hamas, you were killed or removed or imprisoned. So there's not a whole lot of like alternative to Hamas in Gaza. And I think people need to understand that. It's not just like they're just some bad actor and you know what I mean? Like it's way more complicated than that. But unlike, I think Wesley was saying earlier, he compared them to the KKK in the United States. I mean, just I want to give a news flash for people. The KKK is basically illegal in the United States and has been a terrorist organization internally in the United States for a long time. So people don't come out and say, I'm part of the KKK. When's the last time you've seen that? And we're on X and everything. Basically, people say anything and everything here, and no one will admit to that. So just to be clear, there's no comparison to the KKK. I don't even know if they have 1,000 members in the United States. You know, I mean, maybe they do, but no one knows who they are because they're all afraid to show themselves. They're embarrassed because we've shamed them publicly. And one of the things with Hamas is, I think Palestinian people that are in good faith actors or people that protest or support Palestinians, and I would even include myself as a person who supports Palestinians, we have to come out and condemn people like Hamas and Hezbollah to the fullest extent. Like if we really want peace, the only way to peace is by removing people who are using terrorism to enact political goals and gains. Like these people will always bring death no matter what. Israel doesn't have a habit of bringing death upon everybody that surrounds them. It's just not the case. And you can go right straight to Egypt to see the accords and treaties that they've signed there. They're signing the Abraham Accords so that they can have peace with Saudi Arabia, the UAE. I mean, if you just go down the list of people who want to cooperate with Israel instead of go to war with them, they become very prosperous. All sides become very prosperous. It's beneficial to all sides. United States is an ally of Israel. People compare, Ukraine to war to Israeli war. Well, it's not the same. They're an actual ally of ours. We actually get a lot of technology. We get a lot of data and information. We get intelligence from them. I mean, we have a nonstop flow, a spigot of wealth that we are investing in, whether it's IP or actual physical materials or it's intelligence. That all comes from Israel back and forth between the United States. So there's a reason that we don't just go to war with everybody we just sort of disagree with, in sort of polite society. And the Palestinians were in Gaza, in my opinion, if you really look at it, like they want to claim, if you really wanted just a claim to land, you would have been the most prosperous strip of land for thousands of miles. Gaza could have been turned into a beautiful place with every available opportunity known to mankind to enrich themselves. Do you guys really believe that Israel didn't want to see Gaza become a resort paradise? I mean, go to Mexico. It's full. Go to Mexico. It's full of cartels and danger in the middle of it and in certain places of it. But if you go down to the Mayan Peninsula, it's paradise. Even though the cartels are around there, they're not disrupting their resort palaces and their resort places on the beach. I mean, these are beautiful places on the earth, and I know that Gaza would be one of those places right now. But people want to say, oh no, it's just being occupied. Well, it wouldn't really be occupied if you just cooperate with the people next to you. They don't want to kill you. They don't have a mandate to kill Palestinians, but they do have a mandate to kill Hamas terrorists. And I think that's as clear as daylight can be right now because Hamas started this fight. So I'll land it there for now and let me know what you guys think.
Peter, let's go.
Hey, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna speak just because I've been on the ground in London for much of the afternoon at the Palestinian rally. I was also just outside Westminster and what's known as the Cenotaph, which is used every year to commemorate Armistice Day or Armistice Weekend. So yeah, I'm just going through some of my videos and footage that I took around London. But I mean, to this topic right now, I use the phrase hardest geopolitical issue of our time purely because of everything that's involved. Most countries, diplomatically speaking, will say that they want 1967 borders. But the more that this issue deteriorates, not just in the immediate events of October 7th and now, but in the past 2 decades and more, with all the intifada's and so on, it becomes harder and harder to see how those 67 lines can be justified, maintained, respected. Because the Palestinians feel that the Israelis are encroaching on their land, particularly in West Bank. They feel that they live in an open air prison. At the Palestinian rally today, so many people saying that Israel is a terrorist state. They say that they're occupiers, and then from the Israeli point of view, they consider themselves to be protecting their literal existence. They feel that they are constantly at risk and threat from extremists in the form of Hamas, and that they need to be heavy-handed in their response. So we've now got a situation where the deaths have reached nearly 11,000 for the Palestinians and nearly 1,500 for the Israelis. These are numbers that we haven't seen since 1973, so the Yom Kippur War, and that involved a couple of other countries. So we're obviously very scared about this still being a cross-border multinational conflict. And
Hey,
then there's
Piotr,
Go
can you
ahead.
tell us where you get the death toll from, though? I mean, it's important to know where those numbers actually come from and where they're not coming from. So could you give
Well,
us an
I'm
idea?
afraid that's the impossibility, isn't it? You're told that it comes from the Palestinian / Hamas health ministry, but having historically looked at the death tolls and casualty rates of previous wars, like the 50-Day War in 2014, Yom Kippur, Six-Day War of 1967, the UN has made similar estimates to the ones that the Palestinians do suggest, and even the Israelis, I think it was in the Yom Kippur War, even said it was a similar number to what the Ghazians had suggested. So you can be skeptical of these numbers. I understand people will be because the Hamas govern Gaza, but equally there is there has been historical suggestions that it's actually accurate. So make of it what you will, but the point I think most bottom line is that too many people have died on both sides. Obviously Hamas is not reflective of all Palestinians, but yeah, this is the problem that we're now in. So I'll land there because I could talk about this indefinitely, but yeah.
No, absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Today, go ahead.
Yes, hi Nelson. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Sade. I'm an Ethiopian Orthodox Christian. I joined Twitter in 2009 for Gaza when Israel was bombing Gaza at that time. So I'm very familiar with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So I just want to answer your question: what is the solution? Um, I think, in my opinion, there are two options. Right now, there are over 700 illegal settlers in the West Bank. So if they want a two-state solution, those illegal settlements need to be dismantled, because they can't occupy the West Bank and insist on having a two-state solution. That's not logical and it's absurd. They're just pretending that they want a two-state solution while building new settlements every year. So 700,000 is a lot of settlers illegally occupying the West Bank, and the West Bank is Palestinian. Otherwise, if they insist on staying as settlers on that land, I think there should be only a single state, a democratic, multi-phase state where all civilians have equal rights, where there's no Jewish supremacy. So there are two options, but the honest to choose which side to pick is on the Israelis. If they insist on, um, they want us to only talk about Hamas, but they don't talk about the big elephant, which is the illegal settlements in the West Bank. What about the illegal settlements? Who's going to condemn the illegal settlements in the West Bank? Because that's, for me, that's a big problem. And just making us focus on Hamas is just a deception, because the biggest challenge, the biggest obstacle to peace are the illegal settlements in the West Bank. That's my opinion. Thank you, Nelson.
Could I ask you a question about your point of view
No,
on settlements?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, so here's my question. I want the next person to answer this question too, right? Okay. What are, from your perspective, what is the best solution, right? To put an end to this massacre, put an end to this war, provide peace for both sides. What is the best solution? Let me go to Sarah. Sarah, go ahead.
I just want to make one comment about the settlement question, and then I'll
I
move
can't
on.
hear you.
Um, I
Okay.
think it just might be my connection.
I
I
mean,
can hear you, Sarah.
we can hear you now.
Okay. I want to make one comment about the settlements before we move on to the solution, which is for everyone who believes in the settlements are illegal. My question really is, isn't it ethnic cleansing to say that an entire area needs to be free of Jews, and that a Jew could not live in a Palestinian area or should not live in a Palestinian area? I find that very problematic.
That's
So,
not what I said, though. To be
but it is.
no.
But it
I
is.
gave
To
you
be
two
fair,
options. I gave you, if you want to keep the settlements, then you need to agree on a one-state solution where Palestinians have the same rights as you to live in one state, where there's no apartheid. If you
but in the Jewish state of Israel, Palestinians do have equal rights. Everybody has equal rights. So you could have a two-state solution where the Israelis are, or where Jews are given Palestinian citizenship in their settlements where they're currently living and given equal rights. I don't believe it's an either or.
that's not the truth. That's a lie.
How is that
There
a
are
lie?
over 500 road checks in the West Bank. Palestinians are not free to live in their own land in the
No,
West
you need
Bank.
to you need to separate the idea of Palestinians or in the West Bank and Israeli citizens. Israel has Arab, Christian, Muslim, Druze, Jewish citizens, and they all have equal rights. And then there are the Palestinian territories, and that's where the checkpoints are. The checkpoints are not within Israel
You want
proper.
me to focus on I'm focusing on the West Bank, where there are over 700,000 illegal settlers living on occupied Palestinian land. And you are insisting that they have the right to live there. You are pretending that's a legal status. It's not. It's
I am
against.
asking you, I
It's
am
against
asking you
international law.
if you believe in ethnic cleansing and if a Palestinian state, in
The
order to
Palestinians
exist,
did not
has to
create the
remove
illegal
all of the
settlements.
Jews.
No, you
No.
see,
Do
you're
you
asking
have
the
to
wrong
remove the
question.
Jews?
You're framing
Do
it
you
the
have to
wrong
remove
way
the Jews?
intentionally.
No,
This is
I'm being very
deceptive. This
practical.
is
I'm
deceptive tactic that most of
No,
you do.
I'm being very practical. If Jews live in an area, the Jews ethnically cleansed all the Jews that lived in Gaza, took them out, handed over Gaza, and we saw what happened there. So
Again, the
obviously,
focus is on the West Bank. Why are you building new settlements every year? Now, why are you kicking out Palestinians from the West Bank right now?
that's not what
While
I'm talking about. I'm talking about ethnic
I
cleansing.
addressed
I'm
Nelson's
talking
question
about
by
if
focusing on
Jews,
the West
no,
Bank,
I'm talking,
and you spinned my question, you spinned my point to make it look like I advocated for ethnic cleansing. That's not what I said. You are deceptive, and I'm not going to even answer your questions because you're spinning my point intentionally to make it look like as if I said something evil. But what I asked is a fairly simple question. The Israeli government keeps on building illegal settlements in the West Bank. There are over 700,000 illegal settlers in the West Bank. That's not a problem the Palestinians created. That's a problem Israelis created. You allowed this to happen, and you keep on saying two-state solution. How can you have two-state solution when the West Bank, 80% of the West Bank, more than 80% of the West Bank is full of settlers, full
all
of
right, let me
road.
answer you. Let
They
me answer
the,
you. You made your point. I get it. But let me answer you. Because you can have a Palestinian state that has Jews. You don't have to remove them because they're living there. And the
I
idea
never said
to
I
remove them,
never said
no,
to
but
remove them.
let me just finish. Let me just finish what I'm saying. The idea that you need to remove all of the Jewish people living in the West Bank in order to have peace, in order to have a two-state solution, is an obstacle to peace.
Would you live under a Palestinian flag, sir?
If I had equal citizenship like the Israeli Arabs do, then yes.
So you would be
And I live,
safe
And
I
living.
live,
security, and
I live.
security.
You would feel
Wait,
safe.
I live in the West Bank.
Yes, but controlled with by the Israeli. I'm not trying to be.
No, but I'm saying, if I had the equal rights that Israelis give to Arabs, Muslims, if it was an equal rights situation and it became a Palestinian area and I was given equal rights, absolutely.
Because for us, would agree with you on that. I think he'd be happy to have Israelis stay where they are as long as the Palestinians have autonomy over their police force, a military. I'm just not sure with that being the case, you would still be safe not having the Israeli military there to protect you. And I'm not saying that
Well, I
like
mean,
that.
security has to be part of this, though. You can't just say they're equal, they have equal rights, but that roving gangs can come in and kill them. That doesn't mean equal rights. And I think that's her point. Like security has to be
100%.
involved, which means
$100.
you'd have to change education of the people there to say, hey, listen, these aren't your enemies, they're your neighbors. Work with them, love them, be prosperous with them.
Yep.
Treat them as your equals. You can't treat them like they're less than dogs or women are less than men, or like that's the problem. You have to have security, right?
You see, you're insinuating that the Palestinians do not respect, citizens of Jewish faith. They've
No, I'm
coexisted.
saying that on 10/7 they did not respect human life or animals or anything that got in their path whatsoever. The people who were responsible for that I'm speaking about,
Well,
okay? Not
prior to ten
everybody.
seven, prior to 10/7, the Jews never respected them. And why is
No,
Sarah?
there's been security problems in the area that they've tried to resolve through negotiations for decades, and nobody on the other side of the
I lost
table would
Mars
say
there.
yes. That's the truth, guys.
Sarah just admitted to living in the West Bank. Did
And
you
what's the
not,
problem
Sarah?
with that? That she's making her point is she could
Because
live
that is
peaceably
the
in the
very
West Bank if
problem.
the people in
Let
the
me tell you
West
what the
Bank would
problem
say,
is with
okay,
that.
let's do it. But
Let me
one
tell
side
you
won't say okay. One
let
side
me
will
tell you
not
what the
say
problem
okay.
with One second, let me tell you what the problem is with that. Palestinians cannot even live in peace in the West Bank, let alone
because of
go. One
What's
security
the
second, let me
security
problems.
problem?
finish. Let alone them going to live somewhere else on like Tel Aviv. They can't live in Tel Aviv, right? Palestinians can't live in Tel Aviv, right? But
No,
Sarah can
because
go. One second,
you're
let me
not
finish.
citizens. You're not
It's
citizens. So you're
mainly
right.
But Sarah can
Arab
go ahead and
citizens
live
who live in Tel
in the
Aviv.
West Bank.
It's
Look,
really Arabs who live in Tel Aviv. They
20,000
live everywhere.
Palestinians were working in Gaza, and they helped Hamas
Oh,
murder
you mean
those
the
people.
Israeli Arabs? The Israeli
Also, where
Arabs
do you think
Nope, I'm talking
Yaffo
about
that
lives?
you guys
Palestinians with
take
work
freedom of
permits,
speech away
guys.
from. The Israeli Arabs that you guys treat like dirt and used to
That is
go ahead
not.
and
That's
build
just
your
not the
little
truth,
freaking
guys.
buildings.
Israeli Arabs are currently in the army fighting against Hamas right now. They
The
are
Israeli Arabs that
100%.
we
They have
literally see
never been
videos and
supportive
countless
of
of
Israel
videos
as
of
they
you
are
guys
right
abusing,
now.
those Israeli Arabs, the Israeli Arabs that we see that you guys are using them to go ahead and spy on Palestinians, those Israeli Arabs, you're
Israeli
living,
Arab
you are a
Israeli
settler.
Arab support for Israel is at an all-time high right now. There are Israeli Arabs in
They
the
don't
army.
support you. I'm
Israeli Arabs
sorry.
were victimized on October 7th.
I'm sorry. The Israeli Arabs that you guys use to go ahead and spy on other
How
Palestinians,
many
right?
Israeli Arabs do you know?
There isn't even that
No,
many
but how
Israeli
many Israeli
Arabs.
Arabs do
It's
you
two
work
percent.
with, are friends with?
It's two
You're
percent.
speaking in their name. You're speaking in their name, and I don't think you
Because
even know any of them
I've
personally.
seen how you guys treat them, and you guys want to say, "Oh
What
my
have
God,
you
there's
seen?
Palestinian Arabs.
You're not here,
We
and you
let
don't know
Palestinian
them.
Arabs work. We let Palestinians, come ahead and do this with us." No, you guys are liars. You guys are
You're literally
manipulators.
making this up. This is just
No, it's
propaganda
not, bro.
because
Yeah,
you don't know anything.
the work permits did exist, and those people were used as spies, whether they wanted to be or they were forced into it. And that's how they got all the detailed information to kill all those different people in those kibbutz. You guys have to be honest about this. Those were
Oh, so
Palestinians that were
you
had work
guys use them
permits.
as spies, right?
Ma'am, I'm
Let's
not,
not speak
ma'am.
past each other
Let,
here, guys. Let's not speak.
yeah,
Sarah,
let's be honest. I'm not trying
yeah,
to argue every point of hers is wrong, but
right.
I am trying to identify there is some truth to the matter that Palestinians were working with work permits in that area. You just have to admit that it's reality. Was it enough? No, but at the same time, maybe it was more than should have been there because all those spies got those people killed. That's the problem with having the security problem.
You don't know
And
that.
hold on, let me make this point and then I'll let you go. Back in the day when different kingdoms and tribes were warring with one another, you know what they would do? The king would marry off his son or daughter to another king, his enemy, to make peace in the land. And maybe we should be thinking about
That's
something
illegal
like
in
along
Israel.
those lines. It's
Arab,
yeah, well, I'm just saying, like
no,
maybe
an Arab
something should
Israeli
be, maybe we should get
can't
a little
marry
bit out
into.
of the box.
I, Guys, I think we're getting
Listen,
somewhere. Sarah,
I don't know.
guys,
You get my point or not? Do you get my
I
point or
got your
not? Let's
point.
not get into the
But
details and be silly about
I'm
it.
not.
There has to be a way to sit down and get peace, and you guys can't do it if you say I hate them no matter what and they hate me no matter what. That's not true, by the way. I think there is a pathway forward, but violence can't be the way. And Israel didn't want violence. They're not sitting there going, yeah, we're rubbing our hands together, we love violence. Dude, they're trying to make money and be prosperous and have families and have love and have a beautiful lives, and so are some Palestinians. There's a
You
lot of
know that
Palestinians that don't want to be involved in
you know
war,
that we don't have
guys.
a problem with Jews. We don't have a problem with Muslims. We don't have a problem with Christians. What people have a problem with is the damn Israeli fucking government. That's the damn problem. Those are the ones that are
But
causing
that is
harm to
the
little
same,
kids,
that's de
right?
facto having a problem with the Jews because that
No,
is their government,
no, no,
dear.
no, no,
No,
no,
no, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's
It
not.
is.
no.
And
It's
It
it's
is
not.
more
Hey,
than
$100.
one
They're
more time.
elected.
100%.
Everybody mute out real quick. Let me get one mic on that. Ashley Gale. By the way, Tally, accept co-host. I already sent your co-host. Ashley, jump in.
So the problem is, I believe Christians, Muslims, and Jews can live in Palestine, West Bank, Gaza, Tel Aviv, whatever you want to call it. I believe they can live there in peace, right? Who I think the problem is Bibi Netanyahu, the government that's in
You
charge right
can't
now.
blame this on
W-
Bibi. Come on,
Bro,
guys.
what are you talking about? I know Israelis that want to get rid of Bibi Netanyahu, like
Okay, some
themselves,
of us don't
right?
like Joe Biden. What?
No,
So
like everybody literally is saying Bibi Netanyahu's not coming back, right? He's a
everybody's not
murderer.
saying anything.
No, he's a murderer.
But
Admit it,
he's
and he's
not the
freaking
government.
genocidal.
He's not the government.
He's the.
Hey guys, respectfully, if I ask for one mic on somebody, I need one mic on that person. Respectfully. Ashley, go ahead.
I'm gonna wrap up. At the end of the day, I believe Christians, Muslims, and Jews can live in there peacefully. We obviously see there's a problem going on, right? Prior to October 7th, there was injustice taking place in the West Bank, right? And Israel was there as a government. Did they do anything about it? No. We see IDF soldiers literally harassing people with Down syndrome, right? Prior to October 7th, the IDF literally shot a 2-year-old baby, and there's facts for that, right? You want to talk about human shields? They took a little kid and they tied him to a tank, right? We've seen the proof of that. They literally there's a
This
video
is
of them.
bullshit, guys.
No, it's
This is a
not.
lie.
There's
Yeah,
literally a
this is a
video of them
lie.
shooting a
Ashley, we're
This
little
is
speaking
kid,
facts each
propaganda.
other.
right? So at the end of the day, the bottom line is that government needs to get out. Nobody like that's the problem, right? I don't
So
have a problem with doing.
let me ask you a question, Ashley, real quick,
Go
real
ahead, my
quick.
son.
Where are you from, if you don't mind me asking?
I live in America.
Where are you from, though? Where are you from?
No, I'm like American.
You're
She sounds like an American
so.
college student, very well
One second,
indoctrinated.
Mars. Meet up. So let me understand this a little bit better. You have zero ties to the Middle East.
I do, but I just don't want to share my identity.
You're not sharing your identity. You're just telling me what country you're from. I mean, come on, like that's such a childish.
Oh,
What country are you from?
Yemen.
Yemen. Okay, cool. And do you have family in Palestine or anything like that?
No.
Okay, cool. Got it. Okay. All right. So listen, what is your solution? Right? What do you think is the solution to this conflict? You tell me. Break it down to me. Lay it down.
I think I think Palestinians should live in, we should go back to the 1967 borders, right? That's the first start, and we should get rid of this government that's there.
Who is we?
What do you
As
mean
like
by?
regular people, like I just say we, but like as a pro-Palestinian, I just feel
She
like
can't vote there, so who is we?
no, I'm just putting out the solution there. Like you can't vote there either. You can't even speak for them. So where do we
That's
go
why I
from
don't
here?
say we and then say what the solution has to be for them because they have to vote for that, right?
Okay, if you want to play semantics, we can play semantics.
Honestly,
Like
no semantics. Ignore that. Okay. So your potential solution is an new Palestinian state on the 1967 borders, and the removal of the current Israeli government. Is that correct?
yep.
Okay. And how do you think you're going to get a removal of the current Israeli government? How do you want them to go about that? You want the Palestinians to do an uprising?
No, like I believe like whatever government is denying that is currently causing these people harm that prior to October 7th was like partaking in the injustice that was allowing these people to do these things, I believe they should be removed.
Okay.
Peace pipes, and DMT, Nelson. That's what will do it. That will just change everything.
Because we're forgetting how big of a deal Sarah said that she would happily live under a Palestinian flag as long as she has security. We're actually getting somewhere here. I'm curious what Sarah's sentiment is in terms of how many West Bank settlers, or I'm not sure if that's a derogatory word to use for you, Sarah, so if it is, I apologize, but how many people that are Jews living in the West Bank feel the way that you do, Sarah? I'd be curious to know that.
Um, like that's a good question because I'm in an area that's like basically was actually no man's land. So it's more on the Israel side. I'm not really affiliated with any of the super hardcore settler types. So I'm assuming they would be a no, like a hard no. Maybe that it's about 25% of the people. I think if it was a negotiated peace agreement that let's let's like pretend that this is possible, but that really guaranteed everybody's safety and security, I think either a situation where Israelis can keep their Israeli citizenship, live where they are in security, or I'd say 75% would do it.
Dan,
That's that's
one
really
second. One
that
second.
could.
One second. Dan,
75%.
are you here right now? Dan,
Yeah. I'm here, Nelson.
do you think most Palestinians can ever get over what they feel Israel has done to them, taking away some of their parents and all that shit that people talk about? Do you think Palestinians can ever get over that hatred for Israelis?
Man, that is a tough question. Like one of the questions that has been on my mind that I've been, that's been, maybe it's changed a little bit, but sorry, yeah. Something that I've been thinking about is in terms of where in Gaza you've got Hamas is kind of the leadership there. And then I just think about what happened on October the 7th. And then in the aftermath of that event, when they then came back after they had committed that attack. Now, because we always talk about the Palestinians, they're separate. You know, we can't equate the Palestinians to Hamas. They're different. Now, did the Palestinians' view of their government after they had committed that attack on that day, did they gain more support or less support? And that's like quite a crazy question in the sense of, yeah, literally they've gone out, they've done this, and they've come back. And actually, was that a popular thing for them to have undertaken? And we don't have polling data or figures or whatever, but when you look at the videos when they've brought back, these hostages, and you see them like being spat on in the street and attacked, the dead bodies, and them cheering, it's just crazy. So there is a lot of hate there, basically, going back to your question of can that be overcome? So
If the answer is no, you guys could see how there would never be peace, right?
yeah, definitely.
No,
Oh yeah,
100%.
and the other thought as well, or the other thing in terms of, I liked what Youssef said earlier when he was mentioning about uh, this idea of two-state solution, is that we have to, that shouldn't be the first question that you should ask. And so I think the first question to ask, or we need to get people to recognize, is from all these spaces that I'm hearing, the Palestinian side, do you believe that Israel has a right to exist as a country, as a nation? Can there still continue to be an Israel flag, an Israel
Not
government?
anymore. Not after all the crimes that they've done. That's my personal opinion.
They
So if
can
the answer
exist, but
is if
somewhere
the answer
else.
is no, again, there will never be peace, guys. Just
No,
accept that,
100%.
Mars,
right?
Israel
And
can exist. You guys can have your flag, everything, but just not on
It's
on
not
the
you
land.
guys. It's not you
Just
guys.
not on the
Me and
land.
you both don't live in Israel or
No,
Palestine,
but
dear.
you're speaking for them. You like whatever. If you want an
No, I'm
Israeli
speaking on
government,
behalf of people that love
if you want
life
the
and
Israeli
Western
government,
values.
if you want the Israeli flag, you can have it, but just not on that land. Like that land is gonna be for Christians, Jews, and Palestinians to live amongst each other.
It's worked out so well in Gaza, right? Like
Oh yeah, it
that's worked
worked
out
out
so
so well
well.
till you guys bombed their, airports, and you bombed their hospitals, and you bombed their schools. Yeah, it worked out so well.
I
Have you
wonder
seen
if
the
any
pictures
tools of
prior to
terror and weapons were at those
Have you
airports and
seen
all
the
the
pictures
places that
prior
you
to
talked
October
about.
7th? Have you seen how Gaza looked prior to October 7th? How beautiful it was? Yeah, you guys
You
come
mean
to
It
the
every
so,
October
Golden
to bomb it.
Ashley, so with your mindset,
the
if
terror
Israel,
tunnels were so beautiful that they were building, guys.
Yeah,
They're just so
they did
beautiful.
it to protect themselves from you guys.
Ashley,
Oh, is that
so
why all the Palestinian people, the people that live there can't go to the tunnels, just the war fighters? Is that what you're telling us?
Why would they go to the tunnels? Why can't you guys stop bombing them?
Oh, so the tunnels are terror networks. You
Oh,
just
oh, so
admitted it.
so so you understand that the bombs don't reach the tunnel. At least you admit that. At least you admit
Oh, they've
that they're
dropped
committing
bunker
a
busters on
genocide,
them,
right?
dear, and
You
they'll
admit if
probably
they
do
go in the
more.
tunnel, the bombs won't reach them, right? You at least admitted that,
I
right?
have a
You admitted that
question.
they're committing a genocide.
Ashley, hold on, hold on. Dan, this is a very tricky question. You guys like to ask: are the settlements in the West Bank illegal? You like to ask the question: does Israel have the right to exist? And they've told you many times that yes, you know the answer. It's been repeated multiple times, many times for decades. But my question to the Zionists on the stage is: are the settlements in the West Bank legal?
so
By the
even
way, Zionist means evil Jew to these people.
Not no.
okay,
Zionist does.
Mas. Yeah, but even if we, so let's say, yeah, we accept, okay, that these settlements are illegal. Israel then pulls out all the settlements out the West Bank. They pull out all the settlement. Well, there's no settlements in Gaza, but they come out of Gaza. Would that then solve the issue? Because
From
you've
the
got
West Bank, Dan. Well, I'm talking about the West Bank.
Yeah. So let's say they're illegal. We're going to get rid of all those settlements. Would that then solve the issue? Because there's people on the Palestinian side that think the whole land is theirs. They think Israel shouldn't exist. There shouldn't be an Israel flag.
Really? When they tell you that they agreed to the 1967 borders, is that what it means? Like, why are you telling lies? Why are you implying that the Palestinians are not willing to? That's wrong.
Can anyone tell us why the
them.
67 borders aren't in place? Can anyone tell us why the 67 borders aren't in place?
I can tell
Does
you.
it have anything to do with a war that was
I mean,
started?
I think you're about to say
Yeah.
it, but they're
Yeah, there
indefensible.
is.
They will never exist. It will never happen. If Palestinians continue to ask for the 1967 border, they will continue to not have a state because it is an indefensible border, and so it will never happen, and that agreement will never exist. And it's been said over and over again for decades, and I have no idea why people continue to ask for it, because it will absolutely 100%
Wait, what
never
will happen
happen.
if we
It's an
go back to the
obstacle to peace.
1967? Wait,
It
what will
can't
happen?
happen because they want it because they know it's indefensible. That's the dirty little
it's
secret.
because Sarah is a settler in the West Bank, and she knows she doesn't want the 67 borders, because all of a sudden, if that's applied, she's going to be on the other side of the border, which is Palestine. You can't have you can't have it both ways.
I've already said I'm okay with that.
Okay, Sarah,
if that's what
what's
it
your
took
problem?
for peace,
Okay,
I'm
Sarah,
okay
1
with
second.
that.
Hey, one at a time, please. One at a time. We got a
Sarah,
hand
1
up.
second.
We got a
If we
hand
go
up
back
here.
if we go back to the 1967 border, why do you think that won't work out?
It will not work out because if you take a look at the 1967 borders on the map, from a military perspective, they are indefensible. Like, those borders cannot be protected, and that will lead to more conflict and war. It's like asking Israel to
It means more terror attacks if you try to do that. That's what it means. It means
the
what we
terror
saw on
attacks will come from the
10/7 would happen
Palestinians.
once a week is what it means, guys.
Excuse
That's
me,
what it means.
It
in the
means
West
that
Bank,
Israel
Sarah,
would have
Okay, Tally, I need you to help co-host this thing. Okay, just help me moderate when you see that I'm not here, please. Okay, are you here? Oh my fucking gosh! All right, man.
I can help. I can help, Nelson. I can help
I'm
for the next half an hour or so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Nog, help me out, please. Thank you.
I can help out again if you want, buddy.
All right, appreciate you, bro. All right, let's go.
Nelson's or Piotr's has his hand up for a while too, so go ahead.
Piotr, can you explain the 67 borders and how they might or might not work and why?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to try and be as impartial as I can as a co-host, and also because I don't have a direct skin in this game, so to speak. So basically, for people who aren't aware, the 1967 borders refer to the Six-Day War, which ended in 1967. It was 6 days, and it was a pretty. It was the biggest change to Israel's frontiers when the conflict known as the Six-Day War basically left Israel in occupation of also the Sinai Peninsula. So that's that big area just east of the Suez Canal, which Egypt owns. The Gaza Strip, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and most of all the Golan Heights. So the Golan Heights are still, from non-Israeli perspectives, occupied, and they border Syria. So they basically, in the case of about a week, the Israelis more than tripled the size of the territory that they controlled. They then effectively annexed East Jerusalem and tried to claim the whole of the city as its capital and the Golan Heights, as I say. In the aftermath, they weren't recognized by the international community until the US basically changed its official position on the matter under the Trump administration. So when Trump made those diplomatic movements that he did a few years ago, that's why it was so significant, and why people, obviously see Trump as a particularly strong leader or person in the political spectrum. And That being said, though, the international consensus obviously differs with this position, and that's why when we see the UN Security Council, the US is often voting in one way, and the Chinese and the Russians and other critics of the US and the West use that as a perfect opportunity to say, look at this hypocrisy, look at this, etc., etc. One of the land borders was formalized in 1979 when the Egyptians actually recognized Israel. And in that case, they returned the Sinai province in 1982 when Israel basically withdrew all its forces. So 1967 is basically sort of the most clear boundaries that the Israelis sort of defined through military victory. And it's basically what a lot of international community members have said should form the basis of a two-state solution. So the two-state solution came away, particularly it gained a lot of momentum in the 90s and the Clinton administration. I know I'm leaving bits out, FYI. I'm trying to condense it because it's very complicated. But basically, yeah, so Russia was the first country to come out and say we should do it on 1967. Other countries have called forth. Now, this is the point about diplomats. When they come up with an idea that has relative support, and when I mean relative, I mean sort of enough people, not maybe a majority, they sort of go with it. And so we keep replenishing this idea of, well, let's do 1967, let's do 1967. Problem with that is the 1967 borders are very, very they're not connected. So some people have suggested the idea of a land swap, specifically with Gaza, where you swap the same amount of land that Gaza covers and you connect it to the West Bank somehow, bordering the lakes and the land border with Jordan. Obviously, that's not exactly something the Israelis want to do. The Palestinian population aren't necessarily okay with that. And the idea of a land swap has never really garnered more than like 33% of people who are asked. And the last point I'll make for just context is that the idea of a two-state solution based on 1967 borders has become increasingly lost in belief, especially amongst Palestinians, because of what they, again, think of these encroachments on West Bank. And if you go into a map of West Bank, there are sort of basically three tiers of control. You've got Area A, which is fully under Palestinian control, Area B, which is a mixture, and then Area C, which the Israelis basically administer control. And it's under these areas of C that the Palestinians feel that they are losing out increasingly on the land of the West Bank and access to East Jerusalem and so on. And a very last point, actually, because it matters for 1967, many countries that border Israel have never recognized the state. So Syria doesn't recognize it. I don't believe Yemen does, and I don't. Obviously, Iran doesn't. And this all plays into the tensions and concerns that even if a 1967 based state solution was to be reached, it wouldn't be respected and stabilized very easily because it's just so poorly designed. But I hope that
Piotr,
provides some context.
can I ask you a quick question just on a logical and sort of like common sense? I've never heard you speak on this particular matter. Do you personally believe that the 67 borders would even be defensible in realistic terms? And
Defensible by
how?
the Israelis.
Yes.
Well, defensible, yes. I mean, the Israelis have one of the most proficient militaries
No,
in the world.
I'm talking about internally from terror attacks specifically. I'm sorry, I didn't make
No, it's
myself clear.
okay. That's a really hard one because the way that it's constructed, this is my biggest concern. This is why I personally am not a fan, but in this instance, if we want, it's interesting. If you look at polls, many Palestinians tend to be on board with the idea of a two states existing in the same area, and some various Israelis are more like, well, we don't believe that that's possible. So it depends who you ask. Obviously, there's hardliners on both sides in both senses, but for me, I don't think it would be very feasible, purely because if you keep the current borders as they stand, with Gaza on one side of Israel and West Bank on the other, Israel withdraws all of the settlements, whatever. It goes back to the originals that it should be doing under UN suggestions and international community perspectives. That doesn't diffuse the tension of how do you get from Gaza to West Bank on it. Let's say you work in West Bank and you need to commute,
How
right?
far? How
What, there's
far?
going
How
to be a
far is
humanitarian
Gaza from
corridor?
West Bank?
Yeah, but the
I know,
point
but I'm
is
asking
that
how
still
far is
opens
Gaza
up
from
the
West
door
Bank?
for huge amounts of
I know, but
terrorism
I'm
potentially
asking how
and
far is.
hits.
I'm talking about if it, in peaceful times.
Oh, it's sorry, mate. It's about
It's not
55
far, but it's
kilometers, I
right through
think.
the middle of the country,
It's
Jonathan.
about
And
60
They
miles.
can't build a
It's quite
corridor. They
far.
can't build like a corridor.
Well, they could, but this is the problem. It doesn't negate potential
Yeah,
attacks.
I know.
So
I
this
get
is
it.
why I just don't see it being very viable. So for me, Mars, to answer your
Yeah,
question simply, no, I don't. But
yeah,
A
and it's like
quarter,
if
a
even if you
quarter.
built even if you built a corridor, guys, remember what happened to the Channel in the UK? Remember other bombings that have happened to public transportation?
Why are
That's
you
the reason you
putting?
can't have
Why are
have
you
something like
tying
that.
bombings to Palestinians? Why are you tying bombings to
Because
Palestinians?
it's terrorism in
Terrorists to
general,
Palestinians,
generic
because you're
terror.
a racist. You're a
I'm talking
racist.
about generic terrorism, dear. This has
No,
nothing to
you're
do with
not. You've been
race.
saying the questions you've been asking him is, oh, Palestinians, how are you going to stop them from doing this? How are you going to protect the borders? As if the
Yes,
Palestinians are the
yes,
main problem.
self-defense is important, dear. It has
As
nothing to
if the
do with
Palestinians are the main
ethnicity.
problem. As if the Palestinians are the main problem.
Ashley, we're trying to have an intellectual debate here. Try to
Yeah,
look
we're
at what
just
people
having a
say in the
discussion, I
best
think.
faith
No,
possible.
but
Okay,
he's
best
being
faith
very
possible. So,
deficient. If
so
that's
I'm not going to
intellectual,
assume everything you say
if that's
is in the
intellectual, he's being very
worst possible
deficient.
way. I'm going to assume that it's in
Uh,
good faith, and then if I have questions about it, I'll ask you about them. Just don't assume that everyone thinks that Palestinians are terrorists, because I haven't heard that at all today. So let's just have honest discussion, ask questions, but just don't assume the worst of people. It doesn't get us anywhere. Thank you.
And isn't it interesting that she would conflate Palestinians with terrorists? I never
You're the
did
one
that.
who was doing
Let's
that.
not
No,
perpetuate
there's a
the
You're
comment
terrorist
the
on
one
sect
who's
Mars.
doing that.
within. The terrorists were controlling Hamas was controlling Gaza, dear. That's a fact. And they are terrorists. So
They're
you're
not.
the one who's conflating Hamas with the rest of the
If Hamas are
Palestinians, not
terrorists, the
me.
IDF are terrorists.
Okay, again, let's change the subject again in
Piotr,
the
does it make more
goalposts.
sense? Sorry, I know I'm
This
jumping in.
woman
Just
has
quick
a
question.
has a script.
Mars, hold on. Piotr, does it make more sense? Like, I've never heard this before. It may be extremely ignorant on my part, but does it make more sense to potentially have three states? The Gazans are a unique people, I think, in themselves now over the past 30, 40 years. And the folks in the West Bank have their own identity. Is it possible and more clean to make a three-state solution where the Gazans have their autonomy that maybe add a little bit more land to where they were in
it's a
1948?
it's a
Go ahead.
suggestion that's been floated.
Thank
It's
you.
pretty radical. It's not. It's definitely not mostly supported. I would say the most supported, and again, it comes back to this stubborn sort of way diplomats work. Once they find something that sounds pretty good and maybe does the job, you know what I mean. It's all about just trying to do the basic job. Two state seems to be just what they refer back to. Three state has been suggested. Some people even have the suggestion of, asking Egypt if they would be willing to give parts of the Sinai as an extension to Gaza, just to sort of spread out, because this is the 69th most or 60th most densely populated area of inhabited land in the world. 2.2, 2.3 million people living in an area the size of Long Island, I think it is, New York, is very densely populated. And we've seen the imagery of what of the Gaza city and the area has looked like. Through over time, it looks like a very developed city, but it's still very condensed. So a three-state that you'd have to see whether or not the Palestinians wanted that. You'd have to hold something like a referendum, and you'd have to see a more political, less militaristic entity than Hamas, because as it stands, Hamas is largely supported. I'm not going to say majority supported, but it is largely supported by Palestinians. One can argue as to why they support it. But the polls over the past several years have suggested that more than 50%, very close to 50%, it depends on the year, have supported Hamas over the Fatah political organization or the PA, which governs, largely speaking, the West Bank. So as we enter these new phases with the military operation, does the PA have the capacity to govern Gaza as well, or could you see a splinter and a separate sort of group develop, and they say, like, we don't want to be part of West Bank, we want to become a separate state, we want to get rid of Hamas, or we don't want this sort of stuff. But the likelihood of that has diminished because of what's happened now with the airstrikes and the operation. So I don't see a three-state really realistically. That'd also have to go through the UN. You'd have to see if the Security Council and the UN General Assembly recognize Gaza as a country. Getting recognition as a country is notoriously difficult. Look at places in Africa, examples of that. So I don't see that realistically speaking, to be honest.
And
Thank you.
Piotr, as a practical matter, don't you think it's very unreasonable for the people in Gaza to expect a lot of concessions right now after they launched a terror war against Israel, and now Hamas is being soundly defeated, and there's an infrastructure, devastation in the area? Like that whole thing, you guys have to consider the fact that that's going to be occupied. That's going to be really going to be occupied land for a long time. We don't know how long, but who's even going to rebuild it? There's nothing. It's not going to be the same as it was. And for security
They've been in
purposes,
There's a point to that, and then Ashley, I'll come straight to you. There's one point to this, which is that there is some. Well, geopolitics in this capacity, there's always speculation, and people like to speculate as to whether or not the actual intention of Israel is to forcibly evict most of the Palestinian population, at least Gaza City in the north, and absorb it. Because ultimately, this is a reoccurring problem for them. And so is it just better within Israel's security conscience to absorb Gaza once and for all and just sort of work with the Egyptians, pay for these temporary / likely possible permanent accommodation in the province in Sinai, or to sort of somehow persuade Jordan, given many Palestinians have historical relations to Jordan, to sort of take the population, right? These are sort of radical suggestions, and obviously there's no evidence to suggest it. But these are all things that could easily be on the table of a war cabinet like Netanyahu. He is a very right-wing man, and he's been in bed with the most right-wing government in Israel's history, many of whom just want to see Palestine, West Bank, Gaza completely dissolved. So there is that possibility, but is it of the trade-offs? Does Israel just prefer to pay to fund, force the West to help them as well, the relocation of all these people, put the sort of humanitarian pressure on the West to sort of absorb Palestinian refugees, instead of just have to constantly deal with this national security headache that is Gaza Strip? Who knows? But
and by the
I
way,
think
Piotr, could you just expand on whether or not, if you just let things go back to the way things were, that you would be incentivizing the activity that happened on 10/17 or on
well,
10/7, excuse me.
I think that the activity of 10/17, as you call it, is reflective of a big build-up of feelings that I think a lot of Palestinians feel Hamas was the only entity to do, or to sort of make change. Right?
That doesn't really jibe with freedom fighters in the past. Is that what Nelson Mandela did? Is that what Gandhi did? I'm sorry, I just don't buy that.
Well,
Terrorism is not the
It
answer.
was
I understand your
October
point,
7th,
but
not October 17th, by the way.
Yeah, I
to many
said I
Palestinians,
misspoke,
one
and
at a
it's
time, guys.
October
One at a time.
10/7.
I want to go to. I do want to go to Asli because I promised her. I would just say, look, it's this thing didn't start on October 7th. It's existed for 75 years and even longer, since 1917 and the Arthur Balfour Declaration. Right? Arguably, it's the British that, again, always the
Or
British.
thousands of years, even.
Well, thousands of years, of course, but in more modern recent history with the current political systems as they are. So for me, one has to consider what caused Hamas to act. Why did the Israelis feel that they need to defend themselves in this way for as long as they have in the past decades? Both sides are going to have these long, deep
stemming, rooted senses of motivation, justifications, and so on. I'm not trying to justify either one. I'm just trying to illustrate for listeners how complicated this is. Anyway, go ahead, Asley, excuse me.
Yeah, it's okay. He brought up Nelson Mandela, and if you know anything about Nelson Mandela and their resistance movement, he picked up arms, after constantly trying to speak out, do protests, whatever. After that, he eventually resorted to picking up arms and guns, or right? Because
Did he raid the Peace Music Festival? Just curious.
That's very specific, right? Because you're
I'm
trying
being
to take what
specific
Hamas
on
did.
purpose. Did he raid civilian territories, civilians, and kill them on purpose in kibbutzes?
That's
Both
very
sides did
specific.
that,
You're
by
trying to
the
be
way.
specific on October 7th, right? What happened on October 7th, we could speak about it, but don't bring up Nelson
I'm
Mandela
just
when
wondering
Nelson
if he
Mandela.
if he shot up a
Let me
rave,
finish,
guys,
right?
and if he raped the women there and
Let her
killed
Rape
finish,
children
never
and
Mars.
everything
Let her
happened.
else.
finish, please. Let her
Rape
finish.
never happened, right? If you go on Israeli media, they themselves confirm
Of
that rape
course it
never
happened,
happened.
but you
It
don't
didn't
Mars,
have to
happen.
admit
can
it
you let her
for it
Why
to
talk,
why
actually
please?
are
be
you
real.
It
We want to
interrupting
hear
happened.
her
her?
It
perspective.
didn't happen. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, let's just not say it didn't happen because she just doesn't know
It didn't
apparently.
happen.
So we'll
Right?
just leave it at
It's not
that.
Piotr,
possible
can
to
you
know
please
if
stop
it did
Mars? He
happen.
keeps
Mars,
on
don't
interrupting
occupy the
her.
space, man, please.
Yeah, he's trying to Israel the space, right? If you know about anything about Nelson Mandela, right? And you're trying to compare what he did to
Nelson
October.
Mandela was not a terrorist,
Okay,
guys.
okay,
Let's
go
not go
on.
there.
You're very deficient. 1 second, right?
The South Africans called him a terrorist.
Yeah, they called him a terrorist not too long
And the
ago in
US also had
2008.
declared him terrorist. United States.
Yeah,
Okay,
not
now
very
all the
long after
Palestinians are
history.
calling Nelson Mandela a terrorist too?
No, he's not a terrorist. You're this
Nelson,
is
can you
go
please
on one
ask
second.
Mars to let her talk, please?
Okay, I'll finish, right? Nelson Mandela, right? He was fighting the racist apartheid system that was going on in South Africa, right? And he was fighting for equality and the freedom of his people, right? He did that to begin with in a peaceful way. He spoke, they protested, they did all they could, right? In the end, he ended up picking arms, right? That's why he was considered, I think, until 2008. I don't know what it is, but not too long ago, he was
So
no longer
you are
considered a
right.
terrorist, and he was considered a hero, right? But prior to that, he was literally on the terrorist watch list until 2008. Right now, as for Hamas on October 7th, if you want to speak about what happened specifically, such as rape and beheading babies, we could talk about that, right? But history didn't start on October 7th, right? What caused these people to happen? Imagine you're a teacher and you're at school and a student comes
She's
to you.
looping.
No,
She's
I'm not.
looping.
No,
You're
I'm not.
using a script. Come on.
I'm not. Okay,
Ozzy,
you're
land the point here.
Mars, can you please let her finish? Mars.
Yeah. So, what happened on October 7th? You could go ahead and just read the script of rape and 40 beheaded babies and people burnt alive. You can
I
do
never
all
said
you want,
anything about the
right?
40 beheaded
Right.
babies. That's you. You're looping. You're
No,
scripting.
that's what people
You're
say, right?
chat GPTing.
Okay, you're a grown man. Act like your age, right? So as I was saying, at the end of the day, about the two-state solution, I think that's the only way that the Palestinians will, be able to at least move forward, right? If you're gonna say we're worried about the West Bank's borders and we're worried about terrorist attacks and we're worried about this, you're not gonna get anywhere, right? There has to be a solution other than this carpet bombing that's currently going on.
There's no carpet bombing. That's a lie. John Spencer could talk on it if you guys
Whatever.
bring him up.
John Spencer, I've listened to him like all the time when he's in Mario spaces and like that. He doesn't seem like he knows
He's
much.
he's he's a brilliant professional. We should have him up on the stage so we could discuss this like
Go
adults.
ahead.
That was an absurd comment you just made that Colonel Spencer doesn't know much. Now, I took you seriously until you said that.
Yeah, you can't say things like that and get away with it and say that you're a serious person. You have no idea what you're
You
talking
you
Mars,
about.
literally
can
been
you please
interrupting
So,
me
so
not?
can
as
I
I
just
was
speak to
speaking.
something that Sarah and Ashley, who are on extreme ends
No,
of this, would
I've
probably
been
agree on?
waiting. You've been going on multiple
Go ahead,
rounds,
Tuesday. Go
please.
ahead, Tuesday. You're right. Yeah, I was gonna
All
say.
right,
Go
thank
ahead.
you.
Thank you.
So like they implied that if we stick with the 67 borders, that they don't trust the Palestinian side, that they would be facing terror. But that's the wrong insinuation to make. Right now, the violence is coming from the radical settlers in the West Bank. Just since October 7th, this is based on the United Nations report that just came out a day ago. Over 130 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank, and 124 by Israeli forces, and 8 by settlers. So right now you're not even living in peace in the occupied West Bank. You're terrorizing the Palestinian communities. You're uprooting them. Yeah, and you're here pretending that if we go back to the 67 borders, you want to imply that the violence is going to come from the Palestinian side. That's wrong. The violence is coming from the Israeli settlers and the forces that are protecting them when they are going and terrorizing Palestinian villages and communities. So I don't like what you're doing, Max. I don't know. Mars. You just want to paint the Palestinians as communities, peoples that cannot live in peace. They want peace. They want to live in dignity in their own land. They want the freedom to move freely. They want to go to East Jerusalem. They want to go worship at Al-Aqsa Mosque without passing 500 checkpoints in the West Bank. So, you cannot fool. Some people could be fooled, but if people just look at the data issued by the UN, Amnesty, and other human rights organizations, even such as B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights organization, it's clear what's happening in the West Bank. You are the ones terrorizing the Palestinians. So do not come here and paint the image that, oh, if we go back to the 67 borders, they're gonna terrorize us. No, you are right now. You are the terrorists, and we're seeing it in the West Bank. But you just want to completely deflect and focus on the Gaza or Hamas. No, look at your own problem. Fix your own problem in the West Bank. Show us that you can lead. You are peaceful. You're not showing it. You're building new settlements. Then the settlers that go into these new settlements go out and harass the Palestinians nearby. You build walls to protect the same radical settlers, and then you complain that a Palestinian is throwing a rock at you after you've done all that. This is ridiculous. I'm not even a Palestinian. I'm an Ethiopian. But if I were in their shoes, I don't know what I would have done. But I can tell you for sure, as long as you do not give me equal rights, equal dignity, as long as you don't respect me the same way you respect your own life, I'm gonna resist you until the end. I'm done. Thank you. I'm gonna leave my space for another speaker. Thank you.
Tuesday, can you wait? I want to piggyback on that just very quickly.
Yes.
I like to bridge the gap here a bit. So hopefully Sarah's still listening. So I think you would definitely agree with this. I think, and I just want to know if Sarah would agree. Sarah, do you not agree that a two-state solution? Again, well, let's not get specific on the borders because I also don't think the 1967 borders are very practical. Wars have consequences, and there's been gains made since 1967. But let's say there can be an agreement made. And Palestine, however it's made up of, is given sovereignty, is allowed to make the trade routes they want, are allowed to make the partnerships they want, eventually allowed to have a military.
Is someone speaking?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So assuming that we have a sovereign Palestinian state, would that not be in the best interest
Dog
of
is
Israel?
speaking. Asli, if you cannot hear him, then you have to rejoin, basically.
Thank you, Frias. So if we have a sovereign Palestinian state, where I think that is in the best interest of Israel, is that there is no longer a legitimate excuse to have bombs fired from Palestine into Israel. What excuse would a sovereign Palestinian state have? They'd have basically no grievances if they were given full autonomy over their state. And that's why you don't see a lot of bombs being fired from democratically governed countries that have sovereignty, because they have a lot to lose, right? So you can understand the grievances of the Palestinians when they feel like they have nothing right now. And then they're incentivized to bring violence on October 7th because we're all here talking about it. But if their grievances are met and they're able to have a sovereign state, I think they're going to be a lot more measured in terms of how they interact with Israel, because they're not going to want to lose what they've gained in terms of sovereignty. So I think it's actually where the Israelis have to see this is it's in their best interest, not the Palestinians, in Israel's best interest, to give the Palestinians a second state of their own. Because then if bombs did start getting lobbed over into Israel, the world could legitimately see Israel's right to defend itself wholeheartedly. So, Sarah, I'd like to hear your perspective on that. I'd like to hear Sarah's perspective on that.
No, just one comment though. Then it's the Israelis. They need to change their ideologies. They need to, prepare their societies to make
Both people do.
sacrifices.
So when you start talking just as the Israelis, that's where people start lobbing bombs back and forth, and people just start speaking past each other.
Why?
There is going to need to be an education campaign. Again, I'm not saying there's not grievances on the Palestinian side, but we have young children that are being indoctrinated to think that all Israelis hate them. I'm not saying that's across the board. There's fantastic Palestinians, just like there's fantastic Israelis, but there are extremists on both sides that need to be educated on in a good faith way to understand that the
Now,
people on
when
the
you
other side of the fence, people on the other side of the
now
fence
when you
or the
say
border,
both
go.
sides,
Yes.
you are really equating Palestinians with Israelis. When occupied are Palestinians.
No, I
Israelis are
understand,
not the
but
occupied people. You cannot have this
Friyaz, are you claiming that
smart
there aren't
argument.
some extremist elements on the Palestinian side that aren't getting us towards peace? I'm not saying a majority, but some, at least some, we can agree on the Israeli side. I'm trying to bridge the gap here. If we start saying all Palestinians are all Israelis, we're never going to agree, and we're just speaking past each other. We can
So I
agree.
want to
Go ahead.
know. We've heard from you for a while. I want to go to
Sorry,
Yusuf.
thank you.
No,
Sorry.
it's okay. I'm not. I think it's good engagement. Yusuf, I want to go to you. I do want to go to John, and I think free Assange for balance, and then Tara. Brian, if you want to speak, raise your hand, dude. Go ahead, Yusuf.
I'll let John go
Sorry, I
first.
actually can't raise my hand because I'm on the PC. I could just wave.
Oh shit. Okay. Well, I didn't want to hear from you anyway. That's fine. I'm joking, buddy.
Yeah, Brian or
Let's go to
John,
you.
please take the stage.
Go ahead, John.
Hey, good evening, Nelson, Jonathan, Piotr. It's great to see you guys. Unfortunately, I heard somebody that wasn't a fan of my work. That's fine. I actually, I really don't enjoy using the past to justify or even to say that there was good reasons for October 7th. I'm a war analyst, and I have studied Israel-Palestine issues, and Piotr knows that for a long time, but there's nothing that justifies terrorism, slaughter of civilians for the purpose of achieving a political goal. We can have the conversations 100%. You cannot agree with Israel's entire policies. Hopefully, you don't disagree that Israel shouldn't exist, but it still justifies nothing for what occurred on October 7th outside of military engagements. And if you have to then start your conversation with whatabouts, I don't play that. My expertise, since the one person didn't like my expertise, is about what happens, what was conducted on October 7th, all the war crimes that are as clear as black and white, to what's going on since then, and then ideals and inferences and all that. Based in Jonathan and Nelson know this, I live in the world of reality, and not conspiracy theory on what's going on today. What's the path afterwards in post-conflict resolution, and what's the solution to the Middle East? I mean, there's been lots of administrations. It isn't just the current administration in both the Palestinian Authorities, Israel, the United States, nobody that have been trying to resolve that. But no matter what, not one day can go forward with Hamas still breathing air. Hamas will be destroyed, and then what happens the day after is the conversation. I really don't like conversations about, well, they were justified because of all these years of oppression. They were justified because of this reason. Nothing. As a human being, as a person that cares about other humans, and actually having served in the military for 25 years, I do, and every innocent civilian death is a travesty, but there's nothing that justifies October 7th. And then if you try to say, well, what about what the Israelis are doing right now? That's again where I can step in and try to explain to people, and if it takes to the people on the panel, that what they're doing, yeah, you cannot like war at all, is actually in accordance with everything that we say any military, US, Israel, anybody's is supposed to be following.
Thanks, John. All right. Yusuf, do you want to go now? Okay. Brian, go ahead.
Hey there, thanks. And I want to thank Colonel Spencer for his service. I've appreciated a lot of his Ukraine analysis. I appreciate some of his Israel analysis, and I disagree with other parts of it. But it's good to see him on stage. Thank you, Peter, as well. I appreciate your commentary. I did want to take note was one thing that was said earlier. I was looking at some recent opinion polling of Gazans and Palestinians for my own work, and it's not true that a majority support Hamas. There's different amounts at different times. It's changed, it's ebbed, but it's often in the 20s or 30s. For example, there was a poll in the middle of last year that 53% of Gazans at least somewhat agree that Hamas should stop calling for Israel's destruction and be part of a two-state solution. 59% agree that Hamas should give up its armed units and allow the PA in. So that those are not, strong numbers in support of Hamas. There's another one from, from, let's see, it's 2023. This is March, and I'm trying to find the amount, but anyway, so the pcpsr.org is a great site with a lot of polling going back years. So I recommend taking a look at some of those polls. Because I think a lot of people, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on both sides. And one of the most disheartening things for me, and I'm not saying it's 50-50 even, but a disheartening thing for me is that I often will hear people in these spaces online, on television, they will basically justify the worst things that's happening on their side by pointing to the worst things that the other side does. And I don't think that advances peace or makes anybody more secure. There definitely is settler violence against Palestinian civilians happening in the West Bank. Whatever's going on in Gaza, that's also excusable or inexcusable. Whatever happened prior to October 7th, you cannot justify what Hamas did on October 7th. That doesn't mean you can't criticize Israel for creating an environment or contributing to creating an environment along with Hamas and other extremely extremist-led institutions at this point, because the Israeli government by far is the most right-wing extreme it's ever been. That doesn't mean you can't point out that there are things that are being done that will understandably create violent reactions, because that's human nature, right? There's all kinds of resistance to occupations. Hell, the Jews resisted very bravely against the Romans 2,000 years ago. They resisted bravely in the Warsaw Ghetto. They resisted against the British mandate in the 1940s. They were being suppressed shortly after the Arabs themselves had also revolted against the British. So the British were taking turns suppressing both sides. So the idea that this is a one-sided situation, that anything the one side does is justified because the other side's really, really bad. I mean, the whole point of international law is that when things get really bad, when you have bad actors that are not following the rules of war, at least one or more parties in a conflict will still try to follow international law. And that's when civilians need protection the most. When you have a horrible group like Hamas that absolutely cannot be expected to follow international law, we have a state like Israel, and I'm not saying it's fair that they're held to a different standard, but they should be. They're Israel. They're this state that, for all its flaws, within its 67 borders at least, it's a democratic state, and it should not be pointing to bad things that Hamas does when there are legitimate questions about international law, when there are legitimate questions about excess use of force, disproportionality, or indiscrimination with targeting. And that's not to say that all those accusations are true, but I think it's hard to justify everything that Israel does all the time. But I hear a lot of people do that, and it's disgusts me when people try to justify what Hamas does. So the future I see coming out of this, I actually am not an optimist by nature, but I think we're going to actually be rid of Hamas soon, and we're going to be rid of Netanyahu soon. And I think they are the two, not even in that order, I think they're the two most, the two biggest obstacles to peace. And I think that what happens when Hamas is gone and you can get the Palestinian Authority back in Gaza, because let's be honest about the West Bank, there's been very little terrorism coming out of the West Bank. The West Bank authorities have cooperated for years with Israeli authorities, and they have not been rewarded at all for that cooperation.
I would point out, just to be devil's advocate, though, Brian, but that has led to many Palestinians feel that the PA is not doing enough to protect their land.
Oh, sure. Yeah, exactly. Cooperating with Israel has made the PA, in the eyes of many Palestinians, a collaborationist tool of Israeli control, which is a terrible situation for them to be in, because they're the only kind of actor that's actually not instigating violence in any, because you have the settlers and you have the settlers' allies and the government, the senior levels of the Israeli government, instigating violence against Palestinians, excusing violence against Palestinians, and even calling at times for like Hawara to be wiped off the map. And then they walked that back, but he said what he said and he meant
So
it.
I'm gonna jump in now because I want to get to some of the voices, mate.
Okay, I was almost about to say where things were going to end up. Really quick, I think
I'll
that
give
there
you
will
10
be
seconds, dude.
I think there will be more pressure than we've seen in decades for a two-state solution with Netanyahu gone, with Hamas gone, and Israel won't have much of an excuse to not do that. And there'll be tons of NGOs and money going into Gaza to help rebuild. The Palestinian Authority should be able to govern there if they're being supported by Israel and not, undermined, which is what Netanyahu's done. So I think where I'll have the best chance for a two-state solution in my lifetime coming after this.
I appreciate that optimism. I hate to put water on the fire, but this issue has BB's been in and out of power for 16 years. He's the Israeli government under Lapid, Bennett, and others in more recent years have continued these policies, and we haven't really seen a sort of an improvement. So I don't feel that getting rid of BB, as much as I'd like to see him go, is going to be the catalyst. But I could be wrong. Hopefully, you're right, and we can see some kind of pathway forward. But it's too early to say. Go ahead, Frias. Frias Assange.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, Peter. Now, in 2003, for Colonel Spencer, especially, I would mention during the Iraq War, Donald Rumsfeld used to hold live daily Pentagon press briefings. One of the reporters asked one day, there was looting going on all over in Baghdad of the museums, and entire cultural heritage was destroyed. And when reporter asked him, what is going on now? At least under Saddam, there was peace, and now everything, their heritage and all that is being destroyed. And you know what exact quotes he said? That's what the free people do. So, Colonel Spencer, when people are occupied, subjugated, and being tortured and caged, that's what exactly they do. Nobody supports any loss of human life, any terrorism, but that's what occupied people do. That's October 7 is the result of that occupation, that subjugation, that dehumanization. Now, yesterday, Craig, when you were in that space last night, Colonel Spencer, I was there too. I remember Craig referred me to the plan. What is that called? My God, those zones. Now, I studied those zones in detail. You know what that says? 18% zone A would be governed by the Palestinian Authority directly. 18% of the West Bank, okay? 18% of the West Bank. Now, Piotr, I'm sure you know all this in detail already. 18% of current West Bank would be governed by, that's what they say under Oslo Accords, Israel accepts these terms. Zone A, 18% of the West Bank, Palestinian Authority has the right to govern. Then Zone B, 22%, Israel would be governing with Palestinian Authority, and the rest of 60% of current West Bank would entirely be governed by Israel and practically become part of Israel. You can call it West Bank, but that would be 60% of area which Palestinian Authority has nothing to do, that becomes Israel. If this is what the peace plan is, that's why the Oslo Accords collapsed. That's why thing is not moving, because they have implanted these settlers all over West Bank. They are now taking over 60% of the current West Bank. Israel does not want to really give that back at all, meaning not going back to 67 borders. So they have no intention to go at peace with Palestine, swapping the land, territories occupied, settlers being withdrawn. No plan at all. They want to force down the throat to Palestinians whatever the current ground realities they have built. And their ground reality, every day it changes. In USA, it is called as a joke from the Israeli actions, that ground reality has become a proverb. That means whatever I do today, that is my ground reality. And the tomorrow, whatever I'm going to do, that will be my new ground reality. And the next day I'm going to do, that will be my, and that becomes the law. That becomes your inherent right. By occupation, you assert that right. And obviously God has already given you, because you are, according to Torah, you are telling us God gave you that. No, I mean, this is not going to work at all. They have no intention to restore peace in the region. Barrel of the gun is their chosen path, and combined with Torah right of God forcing people to really kill other people, to snatch their land, to chop their heads off the children. Yesterday I saw the Al Shifa hospital, one man carrying two children in bag. Guys, you must see this, really, what Israel does with their
All right,
two dead bodies of two
can you
children
wrap it up so I can give you a
and
response?
walking out of the Al Shifa hospital. This is what, Colonel Spencer, you guys are asking the Palestinians accept. World is not accepting. Conscience of entire humanity is speaking as we speak, right? They are not accepting
All
this
right,
barbaric treatment of Palestinians anymore. We will not accept. Even if Palestinians accept,
Right.
humanity
Thanks,
is.
Rick.
Thank you.
John, you've got a quick right reply, and then I want to go to Tara.
sure. I don't know where to start with it. So since I was actually in the 2003 invasion, was on the ground when said reporter said there was peace in Iraq before that Saddam Hussein led through peace, is such a, it's almost so vulgar it's hard to define, as well as a statement again that just continues to make me sick every day, no matter how much I hear about it. That this is the this is what you get. This is October 7th is what you get from this. There is nothing that justifies October 7th, and I don't even like talking to people that use that logic train. That's disgusting. And the fact that if you have to look up what area A, B, and C's are, that you probably aren't a position to make a stance on the situation in Israel and Palestine, let alone have such emotional responses to what war looks like. And the fact that, yes, when a country still follows every law of the war, when the other side is not, it still is horrible. That is war. But I don't even like talking to people that say that October 7th is what you get and it's God's right to let them do that. I mean, that's just disgusting.
Right. Thanks for that, John. Let's go to Tara, and then I think it was proven, right?
Yeah. So I think what we just heard on this stage is sort of represents one of the problems, right? People are discussing potential solutions, and then someone comes in and, rightly or wrongly, goes back to prior issues, cannot, discuss anything moving forward because they are mired in what happened prior. And it is a problem. And look, I do not support Netanyahu. Never have. And I do think he's done things, particularly in the West Bank, that are against various laws as we know them. But at the end of the day, we are where we are. And moving forward, it seems to me that if we could get, I don't know if we can get rational voices on both sides. Piotr, I think you said you're not. I believe that Netanyahu will be gone eventually, only because the massive security failures that he presided over will eventually force him out. Now, this might take a while, depending on how Israel prosecutes this war and how it winds up. But at the end of the day, having many Israeli relatives, nobody's forgetting this. Okay, whether they agree with him or not, nobody is forgetting the fact that this security failure was massive, and Israelis died at rates they have not died at since the Holocaust. However, who will replace him? I am not at all convinced it will necessarily be someone who will be looking for peaceful solutions, etc. It is unclear to me. So I wanted to ask Piotr something. You're saying that in order to have a two-state solution, you feel that Gaza has to be connected to the West Bank. Is that correct?
Well, it's not that I feel it's a two-state solution. At least under my basic understanding, and again, I'm obviously there's so much to keep track of. I'd have to reread the historical context, but largely speaking, a two-state solution is under the proviso that Gaza and West Bank are fully autonomous, operating Palestinian territories that are together making up the state or modern state of Palestine. The problem is how do you guarantee and implement a effective, stable, protected, whatever route between Gaza and West Bank, right?
Right,
We
right.
we can look at. I'll give you an example quickly for other listeners, but we can talk about this. There's an enclave in the United Arab Emirates or in this part. I can't remember exactly where. Is it UAE and Oman? I think. But basically, there's a certain road that they have to go to if they want to work in primary UAE or live in the enclave. They have to go through, and there's always a concern that maybe there'll be a suicide bombing or a car bomb or some kind of just attack for whatever reason. You get extremists that are driven by completely unrelated events and motivations, right? So, given that how sensitive this issue is, even if the governments agreed on a long-lasting solution, there'll still be radicals who want to bomb it. So this route, which would obviously be going through Israeli territory, would make Israel on edge all the time. So even if you got a two-state solution finalized, it's still going to be an incredibly big headache all the time, constantly, with this commuter routes. So how do you buffer it? How do you
Right.
securitize it?
Right. I mean, the only thing that ever was suggested was, I think, an underground route. And I think, given the existence of tunnels and the inability of Israel to basically police the entire underground, it becomes extremely problematic. My understanding is, and I looked at the map, the closest between the two regions, between Gaza and the West Bank, and this is not necessarily the place you'd want to put an entrance, is about 23 kilometers. The far, maybe more, a little more, the farthest is like 78. So you have some options there. I guess I'm going to ask something incredibly stupid. I know nothing about technology, but given advances that we've been able to make in technology, would something like above ground, but not a highway, almost like a monorail, which was protected by its own sort of iron dome, would that make more sense? And then people who would be screened as they got on, screened as etc. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Is there any
Yeah,
technological
I
solution?
do. I mean, there have been suggestions like this proposed between Hong Kong and China in the past. Places in the world where you have very, very volatile regions because of not just the state actors involved, but non-state actors. Again, this is not through anyone's fault of their own. It's historically because of, well, empire. I just don't see how that is. Who's going to fund that? How can we guarantee that the building phase isn't at risk? How can we guarantee that even then it's not at risk from a constant, potential IED or a suicide vest or just you still do have Hezbollah and the Houthis, right? Let's say Saudi Arabia isn't monitoring its airspace and a Houthi missile manages to get through and strike this corridor, right? There's so many belligerents in the sub-region that I just don't see that viable. Personally, for me, I look at this as a geographer, and I just do not understand how you can have an enclave like Gaza and think it can function as a combination with West Bank, unless you have the absolute idealistic, belief that both sides will honour this agreement and there won't be a sudden encroachment. Israelis won't, at least from the Palestinian perspective, act like oppressors when trying to use this. There'll be abuse, there'll be discrimination with cards, identity, national, those sorts of things. So, surely it's just better to swap a bit of Gaza on the other side, connect it up to West Bank, and you've got one big continuous Palestinian state, which also borders Jordan, which is obviously historically connected to them as well.
Right,
But that's never going to
you would
happen
have
because
to
the
swap.
Ghazians don't want to give up the port. So,
You would have to swap a rather large portion of Israel,
yeah,
right, to
yeah,
do this.
basically,
And I
yeah,
don't even
and
know
both
how
sides are against
populated
land
it
swap.
is. I mean, that's a really difficult ask. In my judgment.
Is it any hard? Is it any less of an ask than some kind of very, very meticulously fragile corridor that the Israelis have to constantly securitize, fund? The Palestinians aren't going to have enough money to do this. The United States is going to fund, the UN?
Well,
Like,
I
how
guess
does this?
what we've always assumed is maybe I've assumed, sorry, that after this, the rebuilding of Gaza will happen, and maybe there will be an international conclave, particularly the Arab states, who might be willing to put some money into certainly rebuilding Gaza. And the question becomes whether they would put money into some sort of land corridor that would be defensible.
Well,
Because
then you
I
need
agree.
to, but then again, because this is going through at least what most international countries, not maybe some of those in the region, recognise as Palestinian sovereign territory. How are you going to? Are you going? How will you? How can you ensure that you'll get Israel on side? It's largely down to the Israelis, which will then obviously come at the extent of the Americans backing the Israelis to do this. So it's a trickle down effect, isn't it? You go up to the highest dude at the top of the tower, at the top of the ladder, and be like, "Well, okay, can we green light this? Yes. Are you going to green light that? Not sure." And then you reach this impasse where the Arab League is like, "Well, look, we'll provide funding to securitize the borders." So there's let's say. I know. Let's say we've got this land corridor. It's a road. It's a specific road, and then you've got a buffer zone of about, I don't know, a kilometer each way. So the Israelis are happy with giving up 3 kilometers worth of this land right in the middle of Israel that Ghazian Palestinians can go back and forth from for business, commerce, etc. Right? But then how is it funded? Who securitizes it? What happens if there's a breakdown in relations? Suddenly everyone cuts off, and then we're back to square one where things escalate very quickly. So I personally don't see that being a longer term solution versus just land swapping. I'm not endorsing any. I'm just saying it doesn't. I don't know. From a policymaker perspective,
No, but the problem with the land swapping is you literally divide Israel in half then, right?
Not necessarily divide Israel in
Well,
half. Just take
I'm
a
not in
chunk
half,
of.
but most of it would be below. But you are dividing Israel by doing that.
I don't know. I mean, that is one other option. Some people have suggested that Israel just takes the north, and then the Palestinians just take the south along roundabout where the top of the Gaza Strip. You just cut that bit. The problem with that is that large proportion of Israel is very, very arid. It's very, very deserty. The topography is not favourable to arable land farming. Also, how do you access East Jerusalem? The Palestinians will obviously still want access to Jerusalem and points of historical significance. So, how does that work? That's why the idea of taking literally an exact size of Gaza just on the other side sort of is that more reasonable, and then the Israelis can just absorb the rest of Gaza, but then they don't want to do that. And do the Palestinians want to give up access to the Mediterranean? Not necessarily. They want to become a landlocked country. I don't think so. So I don't know. This is the problem with playing God. As politicians and
Well,
stuff. But
and I'll finish up now. Like I said, I do think that these are the discussions that need to be had, and your objections are extremely legitimate. I get that, but these are the discussions that we sort of need to have going forward. And maybe it is playing God, but I don't think the situation. Look, I believe that what will happen is that Hamas will basically be defeated, and most of them will be captured, killed. But at the end of the day, the ideology underlying this is not going away. And in 5, 6, 7 years, you will have another uprising that will be equal. That's not going to change either, is it? If things stay the way they are.
no,
So,
absolutely.
Hey,
anyway,
Tara, let me add to what you're saying real quick, because I guess the question is when you're hungry and you're starving, you'll do anything to get something to eat, right? But when you're fat and full, you're a whole lot more complacent. So I guess the question is, in providing the security that the Israelis are looking for, they would have to there would have to be a way to provide the people in Gaza to be complacent and happy with where they are in life at the moment, right? So does that mean allowing them to open their borders, allowing them to have control of the coastline and shipping, and then import and export, is allowing them to operate almost like a completely autonomous country? Because in that way, yeah, I understand, get rid of Hamas and let a real government come in, a real elected government come in. But the thing is, though, if you do not allow people to prosper, then they're always going to be hungry for more, right? Or they're always going to be starving and looking for something, right? So I guess the question is, if you allow the people in Gaza to be happy and to be autonomous and to be living and controlling on their own, import, export, goods, trades, an airport, ports, all these other things, then you would have less, terroristic activities. Let's just be honest. I mean, if you ask me, and if I was hungry, I'd be stealing from stores and robbing people, right? Just to survive. But if I'm home and I got food in the fridge and I got a job and I'm happy, I would not be looking for situations to cause or disrupt, because I'm for a lack of better words, I'd be like a pig in shit. I'd be super happy. So I think in order to provide more security for Israelis and Israel, is you got to provide more for the people of the West Bank and Gaza, in terms of them being comfortable and happy with what they have, or comfortable and happy and moving towards what they have, versus controlling everything and everything that comes over and across every border and things like that. And I'll just leave it at that. You got to let people live. In order for them to live, then they can be less, what's the word for it? Less, aggressive, less
Hostile.
hostile, upset, whatever it may be, because they don't have enough.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point out, Ahmed, and I'm going to jump over to uh, Gaitan. I hope I said that right. Just a second, but I just want to use another example to what you're saying. It's a bit like you have a smaller force, a smaller entity being oppressed by a larger one, or how they feel they're being oppressed. And the example I want to use is Taiwan and China, right? So the Taiwanese, for a long, long time, have felt that they want to be. They're quite open to the idea of eventual unification, just at their own pace. Both them and China have obviously deep ingrained economies. They trade a lot. Taiwan relies on China as its near abroad, its immediate partner. But China has obviously undergone its own changes, and President Xi is a pretty hardcore dude. And basically, the Taiwanese over the past 25, 30 years have become increasingly less inclined to want to reunify with China, mainly because the CCP are more and more aggressive. I'm not saying this is because Israel's more angry, I'm just seeing it as an example. But basically, the Taiwanese increasingly don't feel identify as Chinese, they just identify as Taiwanese, and they increasingly want to become an autonomous state. Had China been less coercive and more constructive in its relations, allowing the Taiwanese more autonomy, be it economically or through cultural practices, then they may well actually be quite happy to eventually become a full part of China, but just a bit like Catalonia was in Spain, quite autonomous. And this is what happened in Catalonia in Spain. The Catalonians wanted more freedom. The Spanish were like, well, we agree with that, but we also don't want you to overextend your representation. And it's an example, an inverted example. And eventually, the Spanish government revoked the autonomy of the constitution for Catalonia, and then we saw the events about 6 years ago in 2017. So, the more you press a group of people in terms of self-determination, the less it tends to go in the way that you want. So, for a Palestinian, they feel that if Israel was less heavy-handed in the way they are, then they wouldn't be rebelling in the way. And again, it comes back to that settlement thing. That's, I think, how many Palestinians, when I speak to them, feel. But that's I'm just coming at it from that perspective. Gatan, you want to go for it, and then I think we should go to proven.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Just coming back real quick from what Ahmed was saying, which kind of implies that Israel should continue to be the occupier, right? The occupying force, because they have to provide for Gaza. They have to provide for the West Bank and Palestine in general. Implies essentially that they control everything. They control the resources. They control the land. They control the money. So they should be able to give a little bit of that portion to Palestine. But that's not what the Palestinian people want. That's not what the international law says about what Israel should do, right? When it comes to recognizing Palestine as a country, as a state, not as an autonomous under the influence of Israel. Because we talk about what happened on October 7th, talk about the terrorist attack that we all saw, but then we want to erase the 75 years. I think Mr. Pietro, I was just say your last name, Mr. Corzin, said the past 75 years of the atrocity or the human rights violation that Palestinian people have been victim of. We cannot talk about a two-state solution and only bring on the table war and only bring on the table human rights violation. Mr. Spencer talked about that how Hamas has to be eliminated, and even though part of myself wants to agree, but when we look at what Israel is proposing, right, which is occupying indefinitely Gaza, that didn't work well in Afghanistan, right? When the U.S. decided to invade Afghanistan 20 years ago on the premise that they were the terrorists, that they were raping women, that they were killing people, that they were savages, and then the West had to come in as a savior and save them. 20 years later, the U.S. withdrew their troops from Afghanistan, and guess who was in control? The same Taliban's that the U.S. swore to eliminate. So why not just come to the table and think about the alternative to war, the alternative to all the atrocity that we've been seeing for not just since October 7th, but since 1917, which is just peace, right? And if we want to talk about peace, if we want to talk about justice, if we want to talk about the end or the solution to this conflict, we also need to recognize that Israel right now in their own country, they are oppressing Arabs, and I think we were talking. As Sarah was talking about, she would gladly live in Israel if she had equal rights. I think that's what she said. But when you read reports from the United Nations, from Human Rights Watch, or Amnesty International, currently within the borders of Israel, they call Arabs citizen of Israel citizenship second-class citizen. Other reports talk about apartheid regime where we had people populated for the vast majority by Arabs, say that those areas are poorly funded by the state, by the Israel government, or they have less funds and they don't have the same opportunity to education, to culture, and all those things. So we cannot be fueling, right? Uh, uh, a, a component of what could bring to a next October 7th and then be surprised when that happened. We cannot say that we want to recognize the Palestinian rights to be a country, but at the same time, create conditions that made what Hamas is today. Like, it's not my opinion, it's not me saying that. It's the former ambassador of Israel in Germany and in the European Union who said that they created Hamas, who said that the former governor, military governor in Gaza in the 70s, says that he was provided budget to fund literally what is Hamas today. So you cannot create division, you cannot oppress people, and then at the same time claim that you want a two-state solution, that you want to live in peace. I think I think the respect of laws, right, of human rights, the rights of Palestinians to exist as people, the rights of Arab citizens to have the same exact opportunity as Israeli should also be on the table. And it's funny, like last couple of weeks ago, Marine Le Pen, who is parliament, but she's also really well known for her right wing racist view toward Arabs, right? And she was a contender of Emmanuel Macron in the last presidential elections. She said that the solution, the peace in Israel, would come to the recognition of Palestine by Israel as a state, because then the international community will be able to enforce international laws on the states, because you cannot enforce international law through sanctions through a militant group or terrorist organizations that respects nothing. So if you want to give the opportunity for peace to exist, you need to also look at that option. So that's
Yeah.
the part of truth that people are missing to tell when they bring up the solution of what could end the war in the Middle East, particularly
So
But
between
I
Gatan,
Israel
want
and
to
Palestine.
if
I
you
want to
Gatan
just jump in
speak
with a
this
couple
kind
of
of
points here, Frias. Hang on, Frias.
okay.
We've got some hands up. I want to go to first, but I just want to expand on this point a little bit because I think it's important. Largely speaking, if we actually break down what are the options we have here, we either have, you alluded to one of them, and we were sort of talking about it a little bit with Tara as well, which is, you either have a singular state which houses both people, both communities, both nationalities, both groups, right? You have a singular country which is either called Israel or Palestine or something completely different, and both live there with equal rights, equal representation, equal say, democracy, or whatever it is. Or you have one group which is sort of semi-autonomous within it, Israel administrators, a bit sort of like what the West Bank is at the moment, but under the obviously expectation that there is an exploitation and manipulation of the situation. Or you see a definitive border created. Maybe it's different. Maybe we see Israel split in half, and the north goes to the Israelis, and the south goes to Palestinians. Or you see a land swap. A land swap in what way? And that's the other factor then, which is what kind of details, where are these land swaps going, how big are the borders, who administers the borders, are there additional external parties like a UN body that comes in and helps to manage the situation, like we've sort of got in Cyprus, right? Cyprus has this very weird situation where the northern part is occupied by Turkish forces, and only Turkey recognize it, versus the rest of Cyprus, which is, well, Cyprus, but you've got this big UN buffer zone which the UN basically maintains since 1978 or something. Do we see something like that happening in Israel and Palestine? No one really wants that, but there hasn't been a conflict in Cyprus since. So these are the sorts of theoretical scenarios, game planning that you can see sort of happening, and why it's so complicated in this case. I promised proven, and then I think let's go back to Nog.
Oh, well, cool. Thanks. So I think everyone has. We're all kind of game theorying out these what's the solution here, but to me, the criticism I've had of just a lot of ultimately, look, you got to have a place. If you have any solution here, you have to have the conditions on the ground that allow for that solution to even be implemented in the first place. And I think the key to that is that you have to have two groups of people here, or three if you want to count the Gazans as separate from the Palestinians in the West Bank, that ultimately want to actually live together. And if you were to look at the October 7th attacks, I mean, you would conclude that no, these people actually don't necessarily want to live together. I mean, there was Nelson Mandela who was brought up earlier, and the ANC movement in South Africa. I mean, yeah, did they resort to some, let's just say military-like kind of tactics?
Yes, sir, they
Yes,
did.
but
Yes, sir,
it's
they did. Yes, sir, they did.
but nothing to the extent of what Hamas and the Intifadas in the past have. There was just nowhere near to the extent. And even then, they really limited their targets to like government infrastructure. And if there was like civilian casualties, they were very uncomfortable with that. Or you could take a look at the movement in the civil rights movement in the USA that was very nonviolent, and it was nonviolent because ultimately these were just Martin Luther King and blacks in the South of the USA ultimately just wanted to live, have equal rights, and in co-prosperity. And the biggest impediment to peace in Israel has been, that you have these people that don't necessarily actually really want to live together. I mean, you have Hamas in their charter that says we want to, the motto is the river to the sea. I'm sorry, I said it. Let's try not to get too upset about it. But so you have these like things that we're talking about, like, okay, well, do we want land swaps? Do we, how do we have access? Do we go through all these checkpoints? And you can't, ultimately the solution to that is just really kind of pretty much free movement. Now you can have free movement and two-state solution. It's something like the Schengen area and the European Union, where you have these two separate states that and they sort of primarily administer themselves, and have boring city council meetings. I mean, that's the future. That's the future that everybody wants. Is basically just everybody's happy having their own little boring city council meetings. And so this is a project that is like 30 to 50 years long, because you have to build the conditions in the ground where these two peoples actually want to just live together in co-prosperity and not kill each other, or respond with like huge amounts of violence, or just the solution is just trying to kill the other, and just to say that hey, we actually want to just live together, and we'll have our own sort of separate areas, we'll have our own de facto states. I'm sort of proposing kind of a loose confederation almost. Who knows what this is actually going to look like. But you can't, we can all say like, okay, well, let's just do a land swap. Let's yeah. Or these things are like the pain points. I mean, there has been two-state solutions that have been proposed in the past, and they've been rejected by the PLO, because they would be Arafat rejected, what was it, the 2000, what would you call it, Camp David? Was that Camp David? I don't know. What there have been so many, because he would have to be, as part of that deal, they would be renouncing the right of return. And Arafat didn't want to do that, and because that's politically untenable to the Palestinians. They want to have this idea that they can return to their homes, and we see this, like, here's my grandma and she's older than the state of Israel. Yeah, I get it. All right. So it's you have to, I think you have to basically allow everyone to sort of like, free movement sort of solves that, where you could just say like, yeah, well, we got everything we want, and if you have like 700,000 Israelis that live in the West Bank, well, fine, 700,000 Palestinians get to live in Israel. There's your compromise. That's your solution there. So and that's a compromise that you could make like today if you wanted to. But ultimately, the longer term solution is, it's still, you just have to like, you have to sit these people down, and you just have to say, okay, fine, you guys can either continue killing each other, you can basically, do you want your kid, like, to say to people in Gaza, I think the Israelis need to go in after this conflict is over, and they need to say to the people of Gaza, okay, fine, do you want to basically co-sign, or permanently attach your descendants to just continuing to die here, or do you want to actually just find a solution of how we can live together, and start to work towards that, and just stop blowing each other up, because it's very
Yeah.
difficult to find a solution until that happens.
Let's go back to Nog. Thanks, Proven.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then Yusuf. And then yeah.
I've been glitching out a bit, so if you can't hear me, let me know. So I think this whole planet is based on incentive structures. Okay, so when people say this didn't start on October 7th, just look at the incentive structure there. Okay, so if there was peace in Israel, I'm not saying in the occupied areas of West Bank and the not occupied area of Gaza, but the blockade that was happening there. If there was peace in proper Israel on October 6th, nothing was being done about the issues in the West Bank and Gaza. We're here talking about this because of violence on October 7th, whether you like that or not. I don't like it. I'm not justifying the violence. Now, with that being the case, Hamas has to be eliminated for any peace talks to happen. People that think that Hamas has a seat at the table have to understand the incentive structures on the Israeli side. If Israel allows Hamas a seat at the table, you're basically stating that they're dictating the terms here. Okay, so Hamas has to be eliminated. That's the very least that Israel it can be expected of Israel. Now, with that being said, soon after that, Israel has to have a good faith solution for this, or like everyone I think can agree on, that void will get filled by another Hamas. It's not going to be called Hamas. It could be called something different. But what is the difference? That just we're talking about terminologies at this point. So, also, Hamas had one objective and they've achieved it. They got everyone to pay attention, and that's what we're doing. They don't have any military objectives moving into the future here. So it would be in their best interest, well, not Hamas's best interest, but the best interest of the Palestinians for Hamas to completely surrender. They've already achieved their goal. The pressure has to be kept on Israel to come to the table, but there's no other solutions or objectives for Hamas. Their continued objective that they are achieving is having children and elderly women being plastered on our television screens or on Twitter X, um, facing bombs that are being dropped by Israel. That's their only objective that they continuously are achieving here, as there are no military objectives. It's only the PR campaign that they can achieve. So people have to see it through that lens as well. Hamas is a bad actor here and has incentives for at least some innocent people in Gaza to be martyrs in their eyes. Okay, so we have to understand that they are bad faith in this war as well, and they have to be held accountable for that. Now, in terms of a solution, I do think the Jordanians and the Egyptians have to be at the center of that as well. So I'm not sure if Israel just says, "Hey, Gaza, you're going to be under the control of the Egyptians. Now your fate lies with them." I do think that Arabs dealing with Arabs in this can potentially reach a solution. I'm not sure Israel and either the Gazans or the people in the West Bank can trust each other at all. Now, if a two-state solution is created, people have to do understand that this will be in stages. Okay, it's not going to be on day one of a Palestinian state they have full autonomy with a military. Germany didn't have a military on day one once they became a sovereign country again. You have to gain that trust back. So people have to be realistic here. Anyone that's advocating on behalf of the Palestinians, things are going to happen in phases. Trust has to be built over years, not days. And as trust builds, more rights are given to people, rightfully so, because they deserve them. But practically speaking, they're not going to be given overnight. And Israel does have the upper hand here as the hegemon in the area, at least. And people have to accept that to a certain extent. Now, the faster people accept that, the faster we get to peace and a true, legitimate Palestinian state. And I obviously have a million more things to say, but I'm humbled that you guys let me speak this much. So I'll step aside. Thank you so much.
No, I think you raised a good point. I want to go to Free just to balance it out. I just want to add one point though, which is that I've worked in post-war reconstruction Ukraine. I've worked on post-war scenarios. All of this conversation is important. It's very good. It's all well and good to start a war, but how do you end it, right? When the Americans invaded Afghanistan and Iraq with the illustration of eradicating or removing the Taliban, sure, that's one thing. But then nation build and state build Afghanistan, to what end? For how long? $2 trillion worth was spent in Afghanistan, and the very entity that they moved in to remove now governs it, if anything, more effective or more in control than it did 22 years ago. So you have to think about end game, and not enough policymakers do. And this is the disconnect between military staff and politicians. The other point I just wanted to say is that we're struggling to see humanitarian pauses even agreed on. The Israelis have finally come around to these 4-hour pauses, but that's not enough. You then need to talk about ceasefire. You then need to talk about extended ceasefire, and then you need to talk about peace process. It's a multi-step, multi-phase process, and then peace process is just stopping this war in its current framing, or at least an armistice, which is simply, it's not an agreed peacetime. It's just an acceptance of long-term putting down your arms, right? The Korean War, the North Koreans and the South Koreans had technically still at war because they never signed a peace treaty in 1952. So these are all the steps that you have to consider. And it's not easy because this is why I hesitate, not because I don't think people who make the comparisons are valid, but the reason why this situation is so more complicated than any other is because you're talking about ill-defined borders. You're talking about different entities that claim, well, the same amount of land, historically deeply entrenched, the meaning of space and place. But you're also talking about greater power politics and a volatility in a region that is not exactly calm anyway. The apartheid comparison of Israel to the Palestinians versus Africa, South Africa's apartheid is hard because South Africa was a clearly defined country. versus this one, which has, you know, these grey zones, which make it that much more complex. So yeah, it's all very well and good to talk about them, but we also have to think about the short to medium term as well as the long to, you know, deep meaning future.
Piotr, I'm just going to be leaving now. Thank you so much, guys. Nelson, Jonathan, and thank you so much. Take care, guys. I'll step
Okay, okay, Nag, building upon your point, which you said that peace will not come the first day; it will come in phases. Maybe you have not studied the Oslo plan. Somebody's mic is open. Oslo plan was exactly that. They had like in phases. They started. They built international airport in Gaza. It was opened, and then the area A. Actually, the things had stopped because of area B and area C. Now, earlier, Proven was saying that people are living in Israel, Arabs, and Jews are living in West Bank. So why we cannot continue that way? Proven. The point is, Arabs living in Israel, they are living under Israeli law. They are obeying the sovereignty. They are accepting the sovereignty of Israel over them, right? But it's not the case in West Bank. Settlers are not accepting, and the framework where it got stuck is 18% of area A. If you give authority to Palestinian Authority, rest of 82% you do not give them under that framework. It's not going to move, no matter how many phases you implement. Nog, it will eventually it get stuck up, because you cannot give outside country power get them authority to rule over people. I mean, this is not how it's going to work. As you, Pietro, said, maybe land swaps. Land swaps is the only way, because the pockets are so scattered and non contiguous. It's unworkable. Anybody, I mean, you can just pick up the map right now. Any novice person who has no idea about the region, they can tell that this is not workable. But it suits to Israel, because they have the military might, they have the law enforcement might, they have the power, they have the international big powers and players on their side, so they can subjugate and continue this occupation. So this is a framework for the occupation. This is nothing else, unless you really accept by heart that these people are equal to you and they have right to live, have life, liberty, and peace and freedom, just like yourself. This is not going to get solved. This is all intention based, because people like Tira can come and give us legalistic terminologies, interpretations, and keep us really worked up all day long. But at the end of the day, if you are not sincere to give people equal rights, it's not going to work. And Israelis, really, they are occupiers. They do not want to give up land. They do not want the settlers to come under Palestinians' authority. So it's not going to work now, no matter how many phases you bring.
Just quickly, and then I'm out of here. Just quickly, then I'm out
I
of
have
here.
a question. So what about? So you guys are saying, what about three-state solution? I don't know, because you guys are talking about Gaza. I mean, I'm just trying to figure this out. What's going to work?
Jonathan, West Bank, you need to look at the zones: area A, area B, and area C. Pull up internet. I will DM it to you. You just study. Take just 5 minutes out of your life. Okay, just 5 minutes. You're gonna come to a conclusion. Israel is just fooling the Palestinians. They want to keep them under perpetual occupation. That's what that framework is. That is no independence. That is not self-rule at all.
Hey, Jonathan F. Tira, after listening to Piotr, I do think the land corridor, underground corridor, is fraught. So maybe the solution would be something like a Palestinian Confederation. In other words, in America, we have Hawaii, we have Puerto Rico, we have Hawaii certainly is separated, is not contiguous with the main land mass of the United States. Maybe something like that, where you don't have a land, you can't go by land from one to the other, but they are in a Palestinian Confederation of some kind.
So confederacies can work. I mean, the largest one is obviously the Soviet Union, but that was too big. Confederation, sorry, in a smaller sense. I mean, Israel's not a massive country, and so when you actually talk about these things, physical, physical like distance, proximity, implementation, administration of the actual area is incredibly important. So a confederation of Palestinians, sort of, so to speak, is something that has been suggested in the past. But because of the way that, as I say, diplomacy works, diplomats, historical sort of great powers like the Russians, like the Chinese, the Americans, whoever it is, want to be seen to be doing the morally correct thing, and therefore two-state solution sounds more politically sort of justifiable and held in high regard than just a confederation, because so many Palestinians in some of the second gen, third gen people who live in these countries that are from Palestine or who have Palestinian backgrounds will sort of be like, oh, so you're saying that we're second class citizens to the Israelis, we don't want a confederation. So no politician wants to be the first to make such a suggestion, and they want to put it in a way that is sort of absolute equality, therefore two-state solution sounds most equal. If you say three-state, immediately some guy I've spoken to some friends of mine who are living Gaza, or family from Gaza, and they say, if we want to be seen as separate to the Palestinians in West Bank, does that mean we've lost access, equal rights to Jerusalem, for example? So it's the symbolism of the land and the connection of it all as one significant piece of land. That means that they sort of don't want to be designated as separate groups, because it dilutes the whole thing. So this is also part of the problem.
But Peter, what I don't understand is, okay, the Palestinians, in terms of the attacks, the attacks on Israel, that makes the corridor a corridor through Israel. That makes it not feasible. It makes it not possible. Okay, connected it to a corridor through Israel or whatever. I gotta look at the map, but it just seems as if what complicates this is the security risk that it would pose to Israel. That's what it seems like.
Totally agree, Jonathan. Can I elaborate off that thought, if you don't mind? Like, I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, you just jump right up here. I brought you right up here, Evie. You just jump right up. You're like, I'm
Oh,
gonna
thanks.
interrupt. I'm gonna jump
Because
in.
your
Go ahead,
point
good
about
deal.
security is very important, and I think, because I kind of had a thought, ties in with that. Like, how do banks secure their funds being moved around the world, like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, currency trading, stock trading? Like, how do they secure the networks for online, or the infrastructure for that? So why can't you just copy what the banks do? And just like America had some funding from, the UK had some funding from the Rothschilds and major big bankers, why can't governments propose certain banks, like the Arab banks, Saudi banks, UAE banks, South African banks, Qatar banks, work together to fund a solution?
So you okay. Okay.
Because
Still trying.
security, like, they have that already figured out. Like, the banks already know how to secure that, and that's the huge
Yeah,
problem.
but yeah, we're talking about security. We're talking about actual land. A corridor makes it not. It's not feasible.
It's so small, though. It's 25 miles, and so compared to London, it's 1/4, a quarter the size of London.
What's that?
Gaza, and that land area is like a quarter of the
No,
size
no. What
of London.
we're saying is connecting it to the connecting it to the West Bank.
Yeah, build a mega city, build a couple mega cities, secure them, use bank funding. You know.
Yo, hey, are you trolling?
No, I'm serious. Like, I think they deserve a mega city, and I think they deserve funding, and I think that this is a great solution. But I'll just go down. I'll step down.
No. You can talk. I just want because we want to educate you. She laughed. Guys, maybe I was too rough. Piotr, was that too rough?
No, it was just very much your personality, Jonathan. You're treating the ladies with your degree of charm that you have. It was fine. Don't worry about it. It's I don't know. It's not an easy thing for many people to talk about, right? I nerd out on this because it's what I do every day. But many people come out with some pretty radical ideas, and sometimes some of the most radical ideas are actually quite useful. So no one here, I think, can say they know
But
the
why
answer
does there
better
need to
than
be this
anyone.
corridor? I mean, why does there need to be this corridor? Why can't a business person from Gaza go, up and do business in a town just north of the border?
Well,
Why does he have
it's
to
not
go
just
all the way
private
over to the
citizens,
West
mate. How
Bank?
about how do you connect it for trade, for commerce, for financial flows?
You have the roads that exist that are already there.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
you have to go through Israeli
it's
territory each time, unless it's
exactly.
a
So there needs to be free. So your solution to this has to have free movement attached
an
to it.
EU an EU Schengen area.
Yes, you have to. I think that's the solution. That's the only way that you can solve all of this, and you get all of these complaints like, "Oh, yes, we can't go to the Temple Mount, or we have to go through all these checkpoints. It's like you have to have this area where these people just sort of trust each other, and this is why why I said this is like a 30 to 40, 50-year project. You can't just have a US president come in, get everybody to a handshake and go get his Nobel Peace Prize and wrap it up in a bow. This isn't, there's a lot of like psychological damage here, really, on both sides. I mean, you can't just say, oh, this is all the Palestinians' fault. They want to kill all the Jews, or to say that, oh, this is the occupation, the evil Israelis. Like, you have to move beyond this
But how can
eventually,
you
somehow, some way.
how can you do all the things that you propose when there are nearly 100 laws in Israel right now preventing Arabs to move freely, to do business, to get grants?
Yes, I know.
Dude, like, these are
I
facts.
I know. Those have to be dismantled. I mean, that has to change. And you have to you have to build some trust between these two people. Now, to say that, hey, let's have we want to for Palestinians to basically say, well, we want to have the right of return and all that. Like, why in the world would any of the would the Israeli citizens, people who live in Israel proper, want to live next to you right now? When you've just seen basically they've seen the brutal murder of over however, let's just say well over 1,000 of their citizens here, civilian citizens. Let's just, some people are going to say, oh, well, these were military deaths,
How
whatever.
do you not see?
So
Citizens, let's just
Proven,
call them citizens.
so
Against that?
Proven, just to real quick trying to deconstruct what you just said, right? Because again, we cannot talk about a two-state solution, right, or a true solution that will be good, something that both parties will live with, and only paint one side as the good person, like you trying to
Correct.
say, or
Yeah. No, you
paint
can't.
the other side, as as evil, right? You
I
mentioned
mean,
earlier about South Africa,
yeah.
right? About Mandela being a terrorist, and said that, oh, it was not nearly what happened. In South Africa, you actually had 99% of the population, which is black, right? But the first president didn't happen until 1994, and you had
Mhm.
high schoolers, and that's when the struggle. And I think, for as an African who understand what fighting for liberation means, right? All the countries in Africa except Ethiopia that were colonized, they did fight for freedom. They took weapons to demand, right, their country to be free. But why did African people have to resort to that? We don't ask that question. Why did Mandela, who was peaceful, decide to take weapons? Because the South African government decided to kill nearly 60 people in Sharpeville, mostly high schoolers who were peacefully protesting. So when you start killing kids and children, that's when you're like, okay, you guys are going too far. So now we need to defend ourselves. And he went to Algeria, get trained, later got arrested, and like, these things were were documented. And when South Africa, within the ANC, were calling for people to like defend themselves, like Mandela, other people were actually proposing worse. Some people were talking about killing, because most South African women were being like babysitters and stuff. They were calling them to kill white babies. So there was
Yeah.
this
Oh, yeah.
idea
And
of yes,
this
we
is correct.
cannot give you what we want, and the other parties are okay, then we're gonna defend ourselves. Then when do you draw the line? You cannot call someone who is, well, we can say things as they are, right? It is wrong to bomb an entire city or flatten an entire city, including civilians. It is also wrong to prevent them from having access to food, just like it's also wrong to enter and commit what happened October 7th, just like it's also wrong to take somebody's land and just kick them out. Like, you cannot separate the two and just say, you know what, people in Gaza are evil because of what they did in October 7th, and then leave away 100 years of history of oppression that happened prior to that. That's just not doing justice to history. That's just not doing
Oh,
justice to what happened.
Can I come in briefly? This is Giacomo.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you're talking about 100 years of oppression, but I think that you're trying to, maybe not on purpose, but distort the entire history. First of all, in 1947, rather, sorry, the United Nations voted for partition. One Jewish country, one Arab country. Okay? Israel accepted that. But it was the Arab countries that did not accept that. And five, six huge Arab armies, from one day to the next, they invaded the embryonic state of Israel. Okay? And what ensued was war, and Israel was very small, almost no army, militias, but they prevailed and they won. Okay? But after that, the Arabs never accepted the defeat, never accepted the outcome. And I remember I was a little child in Israel in May 1967. There was no occupation of Gaza. East Jerusalem was in the hands of Jordan. Sinai was Egyptian. The Golan Heights were Syrian. But then, yet, day after day, they were threatening to annihilate, to erase the state of Israel. There was Gamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt, who amassed a formidable army. In Gaza, there was the predecessor to Yasser Arafat. His name was Ahmad Shukeri. I still remember him. All the Gazans were armed to the teeth, and they said, we're going to march. We're going to throw all the Jews to the sea. In Jordan, there was King Hussein. He amassed his legion, his legendary Jordanian army legion. In Syria, they were shelling nonstop from the top, from the Golan Heights, and hitting the kibbutzim. And every week, 2 or 3 people were either injured or killed. And then came the point of no return. The entire world was against Israel. There was no ally with the United States back then. The biggest ally was France, the only ally. I still remember General de Gaulle. He declared an embargo in March, April of 1967, so that Israel could not even obtain the frigates, the small ships, Navy ships, that they paid for 2 years prior. And the father of one of my classmates at the time, Colonel Limon, he organized the commando operation, and they brought those frigates to Israel over the Mediterranean. And then on June 6th, the Israeli government decided, they said, are we going to let ourselves be massacred again by all these huge armies? The world is not going to lift a finger. So let's attack first. And within the first few hours, the Egyptian and Syrian Air Force that was still on the ground was bombed and rendered out of commission by the Israeli Air Force. And after that, the Israeli troops started moving, and they ended up with these post-1967 borders. And if you think that Israel is a colonizing force, that is completely wrong. My family, my relatives, they lived in Jerusalem for 500, 600 years that we can show in our family tree. And there was always a Jewish presence over what you call Palestine.